I am stuck in this desert with boiling hot temperatures, limited resources, barely any water, deadly creatures all around, and not only do I have to survive here for 100 days, I also have to build a home and raise an army of Rexes to bring the Alpha Manticore to its knees and escape this hell. Let's begin, shall we? For day 1, I chose an easy spawn point to start on, but instantly my life was threatened by 4-foot scorpions that were out to get me. My underwear and fists were outmatched, forcing me to dip. Seconds later, I was greeted by a giant ant, a lake, and a pair of truck-sized morellatops. To catch my breath, I opened my inventory to apply some levels, but the bugs instantly caught up with me, forcing me to run for my life once again. The race for survival turned into a marathon because the more I ran, the more bugs showed up to the party. After establishing a 300-foot gap between me and those annoying ants, my feet could finally rest. But these hands could not. I started beating this tree like the average 1950s housewife, and that gave me wood and thatch, which were required to make basic tools such as the pickaxe. By now, 4 levels were available. I put 1 into fortitude and the rest into weight. As soon as the pickaxe was crafted, I used it to farm flint from a nearby rock. While learning the hatchet engram, in the background, tiny ant footsteps could be heard. This meant run. Then I pickaxed the tree until I had enough wood to make a hatchet and a torch. Because the sun is next door neighbors with this wasteland, I was already dehydrated, but thankfully a fair source of water surrounded me. A couple of jumps later, I stopped to learn the cowboy skin engrams for later use. Drip was essential for survival. I followed up by learning useful engrams like the campfire, cloth armor, and so on. That was followed up by actually crafting the cloth armor. It was nice not having to run around in my underwear anymore, but I got ahead of myself because seconds later a direwolf would send me back to the underwear stage. I respawned and skipped to the part where I had basic tools and pants again. Anyways, after breaking some trees, I had enough wood to craft some spears. A jerboa put the spears to the test. The test didn't fail, however. The jerboa's heart did. I dragged its corpse away from the morellatops to avoid any mistakes and hatcheted its lifeless body for 76 hide. The other jerboa was impaled by 1 spear and stabbed by the next. After cutting it up with my hatchet, I ensured it rested not in peace, but in pieces. Dehydration struck again, but the trees I hit earlier provided cactus sap. This sap provided plenty of water to keep me moving towards another innocent creature to get plowed to death, that is. And his sister too. I was missing cloth gauntlets and boots, so I farmed a couple of bushes for fiber to craft these missing pieces of clothes. Then I farmed more fiber to craft a bow and some bolas. In the background, jerboas could be heard making weird noises. This meant some sort of uncomfortable weather event was on its way, like a sandstorm or superheat. I kept running until I found a water jug bug. They store water in the body, and I had no problem taking it. Right next to the bug was another jerboa, whose life I was ready to take with no remorse. But first, I had to craft some stone arrows to shoot it with. The usual happened after. I plowed it to death and then harvested its hide and meat. As a fair man, the next jerboa I saw was granted the same destiny. The other one too. Realizing my ways were harsh, I made boomerangs hoping to knock out a reliable mount, and soon enough a parasaur showed up. After trapping it with a bola and bashing its skull with a boomerang a couple of times, the parasaur surprisingly went to sleep. Who would have thought? What do you get when you beat a dino unconscious then shove food forcefully down its throat? A friend. Once the parasaur saddle was made and equipped, I hopped on my parasaur's back and explored this world together. We stopped by a saber-toothed corpse because free hide was always welcome. Then I split my raw meat into stacks of 1 to speed up the spoiling process to make narcotics later on. Then a saber-tooth attacked me, but a bola and a couple of arrows put an end to its puny existence. The hide was very much appreciated. Along the way, a yellow drop appeared, but my level was too low to open it. While traveling, me and the parasaur occasionally stepped into fishy areas, but wisely retreated each time. The biggest trouble we got into was this raptor, who got clapped instantly. I also learned that my parasaur could bite cactus in exchange of cactus sap. This allowed me to finally quench the thirst I had been carrying along for a while now. A lack of arrows compelled me to farm flint, thatch, and fiber to craft more, a process that was interrupted by a raptor. I struggled to bolo the raptor until I dismounted my parasaur and showed it who's boss along with the usual post-life beating for hide. Later I crossed paths with 2 oil jug bugs. I was going to keep moving until I found out I was 1% American. A good reason backed all that animal violence, an improved set of clothing to protect me called hide armor. But this land quickly had its revenge. I had found a water vein, and of course I took a sip, a deadly sip, as a colossal figure made of rocks revealed itself to me. As I mounted the parasaur and ran away, it launched a boulder that impacted my parasaur's butt and took 3/4 of its health instantly. I ran away easily, however, as the rock elemental was not gifted with speed. My successful escape brought me towards an explorer note, which was a comforting reward. Me and the parasaur got a few levels from this. Day 2 started with the scorpion sneaking up on me. Luckily, I was standing on top of a ruin that kept me safe. I dismounted the parasaur and began raining down arrows at the scorpion until its health depleted. Carefully, with no intent of awakening the nearby rock elemental, I creeped up to the scorpion's corpse and harvested its body for chitin. The travel continued in the opposite direction of the rock elemental. My hide armor looked bland. To give it a little pizzazz, I crafted the Wild West outlaw skins. Concerned for my stomach's future, I placed down a campfire and began cooking raw meat. As the meat cooked, it seemed like the perfect time to equip the outlaw skins. It didn't need to rain around these parts for me to stay drippy. While waiting for the meat to cook, I unlocked relevant engrams. After harvesting berries with the parasaur, I was reminded of narcotics, so I hit a rock until I had enough stone to craft a mortar and pestle. Then I smacked a tree for wood to make a thatch foundation, but when I tried going for another one, a saber-tooth ambushed me. Luckily, bolos were in my inventory ready for use, and the beast had been neutralized. I sent an arrow to its dome that put it in eternal slumber. Starvation had triggered, but my campfire had plenty of cooked meat for me. The previous events earned me 4 levels, which I distributed evenly between health and weight. As I crafted the wooden foundation, I realized my experience was still boosted by the explorer notes I got earlier. That meant it was time to craft cooking pots that rewarded me with substantial sums of experience. The surrounding rocks and trees got abused. My level at the moment was 35, but it was about to skyrocket. While making pots, my experience boost ended, so I stopped farming to place down my foundation and the pestle. The few narcoberries and spoiled meat I had were placed in the pestle to craft narcotics. More narcoberries were easily farmed with the parasaur, of course. It went ham on those bushes. When I opened my inventory, 5 levels were waiting for me. After applying them, I was level 59. Meanwhile, the narcotics were being turned into tranquilizing arrows. I also made parachutes to make cliff jumping an option in future circumstances. After enough camping, the foundation, pestle, and campfire were picked up. Me and the parasaur were ready to move on. A jug bug appeared in our way, so I bit it for no reason. But when a baby saber-tooth showed up, I was wise enough to show a little more respect. In fact, I got out of the area by leaping across a ravine. The random exploration led to the edge of a cliff with an amazing view of the wasteland along with all its dangerous critters, which is exactly why I jumped right down into the thickest of it. By dismounting the mount before hitting the ground, I avoided fall damage. These cool plants were harvested by the parasaur but gave the same old boring berries. After walking down a tiny cliff, jerboas could be found doing some weird sounds. So I muted one of them with an arrow straight through its occipital lobe. The next jerboa could also get all of the smoke. The last jerboa alive in this area was lucky enough to get slapped by a boomerang and tamed by the good old berry down the throat method. Right after taming, Orphany got on my shoulder and we were best friends despite his family being Thanos snapped by me earlier. If the jerboa had a name, the parasaur needed one too. After surviving that rock, Tank was a fitting name. Me and the boys kept traveling until we found small cactus bushes with purple flowers. After harvesting a couple, we realized it was cactus sap. The travels continued and my hide armor was making me sweat, so I switched to cloth armor, which felt a lot better. A river appeared and despite the water looking like a radioactive waste dump, a sip of water and a refreshing swim were both necessary. Later, a bloody parasaur was spotted and chances like this for an easy kill would not be wasted. Tank just stood there while my hatchet put in work. Tears were probably falling off his face but evaporated too quickly to be seen. Eventually, after a very long walk, these purple flowers were found. I was correct to assume these bushes gave silk, a valuable resource to make whips, desert cloth armor, and tents. I farmed all the bushes in the area because they only gave 1 silk each, and I needed around 20. Suddenly, my health was dropping quickly while the temperature was rising quicker. The peak of the day had arrived, and it burned. Immediately, I crafted a tent, placed it down, and hid inside where the sun rays couldn't directly hit me. Unlucky for Tank, who was bigger than the tent, had to thug it out. While in the tent, big stomps could be heard. I had to make sure it wasn't something like a Rex, so I opened the door and thankfully it was just a Sympatops. My patience drained and my balls grew, so I picked up the tent and whispered in my head, screw it. I mounted the tank and just went forward without hesitation until I found more silk bushes. After gathering enough silk, a whip could be crafted. Meanwhile, my health was still quickly depleting, but I didn't care. I was having too much fun whipping the bushes for more silk. The intense heat calmed down and my health was no longer leaving for milk like your dad. Then while strolling about, the first metal node was found. A perfect place to start, I said to myself while placing down my foundation. After smacking the metal node for long enough, I had 14 raw metal. That's when the refining forge was introduced to my hotbar, an easy way to track the resources I needed to craft it. I crafted the forge, but when I was about to place it, my parasaur started getting attacked. I ran towards it, mounted it, and tried escaping. Upon realizing the terror birds were faster, I dismounted Tank and tried boloing the birds to keep them away, but it was too late. Tank was shanked. As for myself, well, I had enough time to bola all 3 birds, pick up my foundation, and dip with my parachute because I needed to use my parachute. While still performing the art of dipping, I attracted the unwanted attention of these microraptors. They were hard to hit and dealt too much damage. After bowling one of them, a pegomastax appeared and it stole my whip. Just when I was about to strike hell on this pego, a wolf surprised me, and before I could use my bola, it set me to my maker. I respawned and ran back to my body, but another wolf interrupted my comeback. Eventually, I got back to my body and peacefully grabbed it to put my clothes back on. Also, my jerboa died, but it got put inside a cryopod that could be resurrected on the Oasisaur, I think. The new dino. Maybe one day we could bring my boy back to life. As for my whip, the pegomastax was long gone by now, so I crafted a new one. Because bolas were my primary source of defense, I crafted a bunch of them. While repairing the rest of my gear, a saber-tooth showed up, but not this time. Not this soon. It was now day 3, and this Morellatops seemed like an excellent substitute for tank, so I chucked a couple of boomerangs at it, then switched to trank arrows until it knocked out. Berries were placed in its inventory, and patience was placed in my heart, waiting for the Morellatops to tame. The baby was just confused and just stared at its sleeping mother. I crafted the Morella saddle, and while waiting for it to tame, a pegomastax robbed my whip again. However, this time it wouldn't go away. The pego begged for mercy as I bowled it and pulled out my torch, but it was too late. To my surprise, this was the same pego who stole my whip earlier. As I was skinning the pego, the Morellatops tamed. I named it Drippy because these dinos can store water for extended periods of time. I finished harvesting the pego and Drippy jump scared me by already being there. After equipping the saddle, I mounted Drippy's back. This Morellatops was faster than the parasaur, but its stamina drained quicker. While moving around the wasteland, a microraptor stunned me off Drippy, forcing me to stand still for 10 seconds. But Drippy stood on business and chased that chode of a raptor down until it begged for mercy. My stun faded, so I got back on Drippy, but we got in trouble again. The same tiny raptor was back, but Drippy spanked the raptor and it dipped. After casually stumbling into a place that seemed peaceful, I placed down my foundation and refining forge to finally smelt metal. My previous jerboa's passing created a large void in me, which was filled by bashing the face of another jerboa in with a boomerang. It's my cute way of showing love. When it tamed, I named them Lonely. With enough ingots to make a smithy now smelted, I still had to farm stone to make it. After getting enough stone, I crafted the smithy, placed it, and crafted a metal pickaxe. That's all my ingots gone, so I picked up the smithy and forged to continue my journey. A journey that paused when I found the raptor's body. Free hide never goes to waste on a land full of it. A couple of steps later, an unlucky jerboa happened to be here. Not only are they extremely weak, they also provide a significant amount of hide, which means I slaughtered his partner too. Then I found a vast source of water. This was a massive opportunity to fill my Morellatops with water. Basically, Drippy got turned into a walking canteen. I tried climbing up with Drippy, but her brain froze, so I had to go around. It seemed as if I was wandering about with no sense of direction, but I was trying to find a suitable spot to settle down. I walked down the river until there was no more, then continued into the drylands with nothing interesting to my eye so far. My eyes spotted a Carnotaurus and Terrorbirds in the direction I was headed to, so I quickly changed my mind and turned around. But on the opposite side, there were more predators. Getting through this patch would not be easy, so I picked up my balls, took a deep breath, and ran through the tiny threshold that was free of dangerous creatures. However, I was wrong. A saber-tooth ambushed me, but my bola countered it, and my arrows struck justice upon its face. I even had the audacity to harvest the body, knowing very well that at any moment I could get jumped in this rough patch of land. After running through the trees, I ignorantly stumbled into a pack of wolves. Luckily, I only attracted the attention of one wolf and a saber-tooth. Neither were too big of an issue for me and Drippy to handle. The dangerous bit of land faded away, and now, thankfully, bugs were the biggest of my concerns. Get it? Because bugs are tiny, so they are actually a big concern. Anyway, a microraptor duel stunned me again. This time, Drippy just stood there and watched me get violated. On top of that, a wolf appeared out of nowhere. My health was already low from the heat, and the microraptors made my condition worse. I bowled the wolf and got on Drippy with barely any health left. Drippy ran as fast as she could, but then a Terrorbird joined the gangbang. I had to make a move because Drippy was about to die, so I dismounted and bowled the bird. But as I got back on Drippy, a saber-tooth joined in, putting an end to Drippy's fight for freedom. Getting back to my body was mission impossible. Not only were there tons of creatures around, the temperature rose and the heat was unbearable. All attempts to return failed. In fact, it wasn't until the sun set that I could make it back. Getting back the first time was only half of the job. I had to lead as many dinos as I could away from the body. Like 4 birds fell down with me, so I'd say 10 out of 10 on that part. Eventually on day 4, the sun rose, and before the heat could hit its peak again, I found my loot. There it was, peacefully laying there with no Terrorbirds wanting to kill me. I also also collected Drippy's resurrection thing, assuming it could be brought back to life. My clothes were back on, and then I walked up the mountain towards a green drop, which would also be my first drop. It had corn, potatoes, and some adobe structures. A few steps past the drop there was metal. Either these nodes were tiny or they were halfway into the mesh, but Ark never glitches, so we'll assume tiny nodes. This spot having metal was enough to convince me to live here, so I pulled out the adobe foundations and placed them in a cozy corner. The adobe walls followed. I placed a smithy and a foundation outside for the refining forge. The smoke grenade I got from the drop got tossed for fun, because that's the only use for such a useless item. Anyway, you could tell the base wasn't finished, so I placed down a bed and farmed a tree for enough wood to craft the missing pieces. Somehow within the 5 seconds I was away from my shack, a cardinal spawned in. Not to worry, as a genius plan was unveiled before me. I climbed up a ledge to distance myself from the cardinal while shooting arrows at it, but the cardinal was freakishly smart enough to find this ledge too. From there on, it was every man for himself. Luckily, I beat the cardinal, but the smell of its corpse attracted the attention of a vulture and an Argentavis, which is basically a bigger vulture. My plan was to finish building my base to protect myself inside, so I took cover behind the smithy as I began placing down the last pieces of the puzzle. Although I was safe, the base was taking a hit for me. The best solution I came up with was called sacrifice. After leaving all my loot in the smithy, I ran out of the base and the silly birds followed. Upon respawning, I looted the forge for ingots and used them to craft a hatchet and a crossbow. I opened my door and was excited to farm with my metal tools, but an RG was waiting for me, so I rushed back inside. Once again, the good old run away and distract strategy was applied successfully. Shameless tactic for a shameless player. One miscalculation. My bed cooldown wasn't over, so I had to sit here for 5 minutes. Later, I spawned back in, opened my door, and guess what? A cardinal was out there waiting for me. I nearly did the same thing until I remembered the bed cooldown again. So, while being forced to fight back, a great idea came to life. I grabbed my crossbow, opened the door, and began shooting arrows from the safety of my base. The cardinal was getting owned, but it kept trying to get inside until it died. But there it was, the same old stupid RG camping outside. Frustrated and angered, I crafted a second bed because I'd probably need it soon. I got my crossbow, opened the door, and now there were thorny dragons outside. Great. Headshots did 200 damage to them, so it wouldn't be long before they passed away. Sadly, however, when one died, the other ate the body, which fully heals wild dinos. I walked outside to hunt down the last thorny dragon, but it was focused on breaking my forge. When I tried saving my forge, I ended up on a stretcher. I respawned, collected my body, ran back inside my base like a coward, and then started shooting the thorn demon. It got away with one more laugh by breaking all my beds, but I had the last laugh as its heart stopped beating. Thanks for the keratin, idiot. Peace finally returned to my neighborhood, allowing me to actually progress again. Progress meant farming forges to smelt metal faster and placing my new bed. To avoid cooking myself while in base, I placed the 2 new forges further away this time. Those forges would not fill themselves up, so I started hitting metal nodes until there were no more around me. A third forge was also placed. Soon, I would get to taming RGs since they were pretty common in this area, so I crafted plenty of trank arrows to be ready. After collecting the ingots from my forges, a sickle was made for fiber farming purposes. A couple seconds later, I had over 3,000 fiber. Then I hit some trees and rocks with a pickaxe for flint and thatch to make tons of arrows. Day 5 now, and while I waited for metal to smelt, I broke every tree and rock near me to farm for the RG trap. After breaking like 10 rocks, I could make 1 stone wall. Let's go. Only 7 left. Ah yes, my farm was interrupted by a hungry saber-tooth pack rushing at me. I took cover inside my base and began shooting arrows from inside, a tactic that proved to be cowardly and effective. However, the saber-tooths made it difficult because they didn't stand in front of the door. I mean, one of them was literally on top of the base. Spider tooth. Was that funny? Anyways, I felt brave enough to go outside and fight the last 2 saber tooths by boloing them and applying pressure with straight headshots. They brought a baby along on the attack, so I adopted it after killing its parents because that's how Ark works. I took it a step further by placing campfires and cooking its parents in front of it. The cold-blooded saber didn't care and asked to cuddle with his parents' murderer for imprint. When I turned around, I caught a glimpse of the distant dunes. One day, it would be time to explore it. Back to reality, more slave-like stone farming had to be done until a superheat arrived, which forced me to retreat into my tent. The tent's insulation allows me to not be burnt alive by the heat wave. I jumped out of the tent quickly to cuddle with the saber-tooth and went back inside, but the tent wasn't enough. Despite taking off my hide armor and replacing it with cloth, I was still being cooked alive by the heat. I placed the tent farther away from the campfires and forges, but the heat was still unbearable. The next tent placement was in a shade, but physics don't apply in Ark. Eventually the superheat dissipated, then a vulture landed in my base, so I bolted in and killed it to avoid future conflict. That That's when I looked up and saw a huge tsunami of sand coming my way. Immediately, I hid in my tent, and once again I was forced to do nothing but wait for this natural disaster to go away. Sandstorms aren't the worst, however. It just slowed my character down. So I picked up the tent and walked towards the trees to resume my progress. I crafted the last structure I needed to make the RJ trap, and the sandstorm faded away. Another metal node was spotted, and I farmed it until my character was too heavy to farm more. Then I walked back to the forges and filled them with the metal and wood I just farmed. It didn't take long for me to find an Argentavis. In fact, there wasn't one, there were a few. I didn't notice I was thirsty, and while building the trap, I fell asleep. After reawakening, I ignored my basic needs and tried shooting an RG to bring it to my trap, but my aim wasn't doing me any favors. After a couple of misses, an RG landed close enough for me to hit it. I led it back to the trap to realize it was a level 20. So I switched from trank arrows to death arrows and killed it for being a disgusting low level. I walked up to the same area and clapped a sabertooth so I could peacefully search for the next RG to trap, but then a Carno showed up. I handled the Carno situation by parachuting downhill. This allowed me to stay in the air while shooting the Carno. Not my fault, his brain missed a couple of million years of updates called evolution. Back at the bird spot, one was already waiting for me. This one was a level 75, which was good enough at the time, so I started knocking it out. When it fell asleep, I picked up the trap and I'd come back later with meat to tame it. First, I harvested nearby crystals to make a spyglass. Then I killed a thorny dragon because I needed lots of keratin to make the RG saddle. A second dragon showed up and he too got packed up. In total, I got nearly 90 keratin. I needed 150, but there was a scorpion there too at the right place and time, waiting to be slaughtered for a bigger purpose. As I checked if I could craft the RG saddle, I dehydrated and knocked out. It wasn't until day 6 that I woke up and farmed the metal nodes around me. Back at base while putting wood in the campfires to turn them on, an RG attacked me. It was a level 125, so instead of killing it, I figured I'd put down my trap to tame it, but while doing so, it killed my level 26 sabertooth, who I actually couldn't care less for. Then I trapped the RG and began knocking it out, but another RG got too close, so I warded it off by hitting some sick far distance shots. Anyway, not too long after the RG knocked out, I took the wrong turn and strayed farther from base, which got me in trouble with a thorny dragon and then a sabertooth, but both got handled easily. I even adopted another sabertooth baby who was killed by another sabertooth right after, but I got my revenge, of course. Not that I cared about the baby, but I needed hide. The RG tamed and I named it Victor. While trying to get back to base, which was 5 feet away, I somehow got lost. After looking at my recent deaths on the map, I knew where I had to go. Back at base, I crafted the RG saddle and put it on Victor, who was ready to fly with me. It felt great to give my feet a rest and put Victor's wings to work. We stopped by a water vein for a hydrating sip. The other RG was still waiting to be fed, so I left base in search of prime meat. That's when I found the Carno mother with 2 babies. One of them would become an orphan, the other would turn into RG food. Nothing better than the taste of baby meat in the morning, said the RG as it woke up. I named it Jose and then picked up the trap. I also yoinked the saddle from Victor and gave it to Jose, who was a higher level and just better. And a sandstorm arrived, so I retreated into my tent and waited until the sounds of windy sands faded and I could return to the outer world. First thing I did was enable mating on both birds to get a fertilized egg, just in case either of the birds died in future circumstances, which are probable with me playing. An RG also got too close for comfort, so I put its life to an end. This other RG was quite far, but eventually it would come annoy me, so why not get it over with? As I killed it, I fell down back to my base, so I climbed back up to the birds and collected the egg. The RG had some silk in it, which I put in the smithy to finally craft my desert cloth armor. All pieces were crafted except the helmet, which required silica pearls. The heat was burning through my health until I swapped out the hide armor for the desert. Then I crafted 2 mortar and pestles and placed them by the smithy. Outside, an RG wanted to smoke, but got smoked instead, and next to my base I saw a green drop that had journeyman cloth boots along with other equally useless items. The silica pearls I needed could be found at Red Obelisk, which was pretty close to my base. When I got there, the pearls weren't hard to find and my whip allowed me to farm them quickly. After a couple of seconds, I had over 300 pearls, which meant it was time to return to base and craft my desert cloth helmet. But on my way back, I spotted some obsidian rocks, which I farmed as obsidian could later be turned into polymer in the fabricator. After farming enough to craft a chainsaw, I flew back to base. I tried making the desert helmet, but I was still missing cristal, so I flew to the same spot I found it earlier, and after killing the RGs, Carnos, and scorpions guarding it, I could farm more than enough cristal. On day 7, the desert goggles were crafted, and I started crafting paste, spark powder, and farmed oil from a jug bug to make a fabricator. Then I looted a purple drop with loot not even worth showing. Back at base, I put all the sand and cactus sap I had into a pestle to make clay, which is used to make adobe structures. Then I flew out in search of drops, hoping to get something worthwhile. The first drop would be blue, and it had fur armor. That's like going to the Sahara Desert and giving someone a sweater. I took that garbage drop as a sign to stop looting them and go back to base. I placed an adobe foundation in front of my base and turned the wooden wall into a window window, then replaced it with an adobe window. Then I grabbed the fabricator from the smithy and placed it in front of the window so I could easily access it while inside the base. Earlier I put hide and oil into a refining forge to make gasoline, which was used to turn the fabricator on. Not like in a weird way, but like so it could work. The first assignment I gave the fabricator was to craft 25 electronics. This was an exact amount needed later to craft a chainsaw. The only problem now was cementing paste, which required stone and keratin, and I barely had either. But I remembered there was a huge skeleton above my base, and we all know bones equals keratin, right? That's when I found out the skeleton was here purely for aesthetics. I was about to fly away in search of keratin when an RG started attacking Victor. I ended the bird's life and then found the Limantra, which meant free chitin. While flying around near the dunes, I found some ruins with an explorer note. I grabbed the note and ventured deeper into the dunes because the rain made the temperature bearable. Lots of sources of chitin could be found in the dunes, and I took advantage of every moment while stacking up on chitin. Later I found an artopluera, which gave me twice as much chitin as the scorpions did. In the blink of an eye, the rain stopped and a superheat arrived. What a turn of events. Well, I was deep into the dunes. Immediately I started flying back to the mainland while my health depleted by the second. I was at the edge of the dunes looking for a safe spot to place my tent when a Eutyrannus loudly roared, causing my Argentavis to panic and fly around aimlessly. When Jose calmed down, I landed, placed my tent, and stayed inside until the superheat ended. That's when I picked up my tent and flew back to base with Jose. I put the chitin into the mortar, but now I had to farm stone. Again, an RG was attacking my boy Victor, so I came to his defense. Anyway, I put the stone in the pestle and began crafting a solid amount of paste. More stone could be farmed, however, so after repairing my hatchet, I did exactly that until I saw a yellow drop far in the distance, which of course I had to go loot. After traversing a considerable amount of distance on an extremely slow fat bird called Jose, no discrimination, the yellow drop had the audacity to give me a 60 armor Tailacoleo saddle. Whoever designed Ark's drops, keep yourselves. I still took the saddle, and while flying towards the blue drop, I spotted an explorer note which was free XP. The blue drop had more semi-useless saddles, and soon after I found the level 95 Enki, which was high enough for me and my rock bottom standards. I knew better than to tame the Enki at my base because every 30 seconds 15 RGs and Cardinals spawned by it, so this river felt like a safer place for this Enki's upbringing. Speaking of safety, while knocking out the Enki, I saw a wolf chasing down a Morellatops. Eventually the Enki fell asleep, and to keep it safe I killed the raptor that was wandering in the area. After putting berries in the Enki, I realized it would take a while to tame, and there was no shot I'd stick around for this. Also, don't tell anyone, this is a secret, but dinos don't move when you don't render them in Ark, so it was safe to assume the Enki would live, and one day I'd come back for it. Nighttime arrived, a perfect opportunity to go back to the dunes because no sun equals cool. The clock hit day 8 as I arrived at the dunes. My only chance to get enough chitin and organic polymer for the chainsaw was now, and wouldn't come again until the next night. Nighttime didn't last very long either on this land, so my time was limited. I imagined mantis would appear at every corner here in the dunes. In fact, I assumed there would be too many for me to handle, but the dunes were filled with every type of bug except the one I was looking for, because this is Ark. The sun started coming out and I had not found a single mantis yet, but the heat was still moderate. Of course, a couple of seconds later the fire emoji popped up at the bottom right, and I was in trouble. My health was quickly perishing, but not too long after a pair of mantis finally appeared. Murdering them would be quite easy as both were low levels. The first one I killed gave me 16 organic polymer, while the other one I harvested with the RZ and got a puny 11 organic polymer. After fighting them, I was half health and the heat wasn't helping, but the search for more mantis had to continue. There was no going back without my 75 polymer for the chainsaw, but my health dropped quicker than I expected, so I had to place down a bed and respawn to replenish my health. Then I placed the tent and waited for the bed's timer to finish so I could pick it up for future use. My search for mantis resumed, and to my surprise a pack of 3 appeared, which earned me a bunch of chitin and over 100 organic polymer. I found 2 more mantis after that, but could only kill one of them as my health was about to abandon me for good. I flew to the mainland, which wasn't nearly as hot as the dunes, which allowed me to survive. Now I could return to base with enough polymer and chitin to make the chainsaw, but first I looted a yellow drop with a ring that had some insane Rex, Yuri, and Forasolokulukusukachukis saddles in it. On my way back to the trap house, I took a detour for the Ankylosaurus, which we all probably forgot about by now. It had tamed, so I picked it up and took it with me. When I got back to base, I deposited the polymer and the chitin into the fabricator and pestles. Then I killed a hostile RG near the base, crafted the Ankylosaurus saddle, and immediately put it to work by farming flint, stone, and metal. The days of using my pickaxe were long gone now with this Anky. I was also going to need a lot of more forges soon. The flint and stone were moved into the pestles to craft paste and spark powder. The chainsaw got crafted, and next on my to-do list was the oil pump because I would not rely on yoinking junk bugs forever. The chainsaw investment turned out to be successful as I quickly chopped down a bunch of trees for wood to fill my forges up. On day 9, I began clearing Jose's inventory as it was filled with lots of random items like the saddles and the rest of the loot I got from drops. The smithy was nearly full with a bunch of garbage, so I threw all the items that I got from the bird convert into the fabricator for now, because I was too lazy to make a storage box. I dragged the refining forge blueprint from my engrams tab into my hotbar, then I got on Jose and brought the Yankee along with me to farm stone to make more forges. A saber-tooth interrupted my farming sesh, so I interrupted its life permanently and harvested its body with my chainsaw, which gave me a decent bit of hide. The farming session continued until hostiles showed up, but they were quickly tended to. A white drop landed next to me, so I figured why not see what it contained, and quickly I realized exactly why I shouldn't have. I smacked a couple more rocks with the Ankylosaurus as well as some metal nodes. 8 refining forges later, I returned to base, placed down a stone foundation and the 8 forges. Then I dropped the Ankylo closer to the forges to deposit the metal into the forges quicker, as my player can't carry even a fourth of all the metal that I farmed. But before doing that, I looted the metal ingots from the forges and put them into the fabricator to craft the oil rig, which would provide a steady amount of oil passively. I didn't know this map was Middle Eastern. Alhamdulillah. There were too many forges too close to the base, which made my home incredibly hot, so I picked up the forges and replaced them far enough to not melt me while inside my base. Anyway, after relocating the forges, I had to transfer the metal and wood from the item caches into the forges, but the heat killed me in the middle of this annoying process. I respawned and continued transferring the metal slowly, little by little, until there was none left to transfer. Then I got on Jose and started flying around the wasteland in search of a decent level Doedicarus. Why? Because Doeds were and still are and forever will be the absolute best way to farm stone in Ark. But a superheat appeared which froze my search for a Doed and forced me to retreat into my tent, but at least I had an excuse to go AFK for the next 5 minutes. I was so bored I spammed D on the tent, which made it open and close non-stop. A questionable vision came across my head during this moment, but let's move on. The superheat faded away, which meant I could stop being AFK. Then I picked up my tent, got on Jose, and the search for a Doedicarus resumed, but the levels and all the Doeds I saw so far sucked. But I knew my time would come. I had to just keep searching. The highest level I had seen so far was a level 80, but it was getting verbally and physically abused, so taming that one wasn't an option as its health was already too low and it had a lot of trauma. A few moments later, I found the level 70 Doedicarus. I was about to knock it out when a rock elemental popped out, so I kidnapped the Doed with my claws instead and took it somewhere safer. Day 10 started with me clapping a kangaroo. Well, trying at least. It was way too fast for me to catch up. I dropped the Doedicarus somewhere safe so I could farm hide to make a parasaur saddle. And yeah, I knocked out a parasaur to farm narcoberries because I didn't have enough trank arrows on me to knock out the Doedicarus. After knocking out a jerboa that was next to my parasaur, his family attacked me for revenge, but they barely touched me and got sent to the afterlife. Then I placed a thatch foundation and a mortar to craft narcotics later. I whipped the bushes next to the parasaur so I could get enough berries to tame it. Immediately after, it tamed and I named it an improvisation, because that's all it was. Me improvising a way to farm narcotics in the middle of nowhere to tame the Doedicarus here, because my base is always hell. So I harvested some bushes with the parasaur and quickly I had enough narcoberries to craft 30 narcotics. This meant I could start shooting the Doedicarus, and when I ran out of trank arrows, I accessed the pestle, looted the narcotics, and turned them into trank arrows to keep shooting the Doed until it knocked out next to the thatch foundation. I stared at the Doedicarus' taming progress as I was out of ideas of things to do while it tamed, besides staring at myself, hiding my hat, and performing new emotes like the dual one. However, I remembered a Doed needs a Doed saddle, and hide was the key resource, so I killed the Morellatops family next to me to satisfy my progress. There was also a mother cardinal with her child, and sadly I had to end their bloodline because they were too close for comfort, and I appreciated the hide. Even as I chilled and stayed AFK, a stupid jerboa walked right in front of me. This was basically a free Uber Eats delivery. A juvenile jerboa was just standing there staring at me, so I put it down. When I tried chainsawing it, I realized I couldn't because there was an active electrical storm which disables electronics. Why though? I thought gasoline powered the chainsaw. But welcome to Ark, where chainsaws need Wi-Fi to function. The Doed was about 60% done when an oil jug bug appeared, and as an exemplary American citizen, I took what was rightfully mine, foreign oil. Right after the electrical storm, a superheat arrived, but I didn't mind it as I was already basically AFK, until I realized there was a yellow drop with a ring near me. The drop was half horrible and half decent. It had a Lamantro saddle BP and a small elevator platform, which I could demolish in the future for metal and polymer. This short trip to the drop put me at half health, so I got back inside the tent. Soon after, the Doed tamed and I named it Stoner, but the superheat was still active, so I wasn't going anywhere. The Doed and the RG can both suck it and stay outside there in the heat. After cooking me for a good 7 minutes, the super cook event ended and I could fly back to base. But when I found metal nodes on these pillars, I stopped to farm them with the Doed, who could swing on its own until it got half full. Later, Jose ran out of stamina and we had to land next to a scorpion, which would be Stoner's first fight. A saber-tooth and another scorpion joined the fight, but they were also neutralized. Day 11 and I was back home with the Doed. As per usual, a thorny dragon was vibing next to my base, and before it could attack my dinos, I fully assaulted it, sending it to the thorny afterlife. My refining forges would surely have a decent bit of ingots, so I started looting the ones that were smelting. I got a grand grand total of 200 ingots from this, which I could use to make a fridge, more electronics, and finally probably the biggest carry, the canteen. After that, I opened my engrams menu to learn a bunch of late game items like turrets, industrial structures, and more. I looked at the cost of stuff like the industrial forge and chemistry bench, but I was still a bit far from that. In the smithy, my desert cloth armor and shield were repaired. Then I crafted a generator and placed it next to the base. Then I placed the fridge next to the fabricator and put food inside of it. I used the stone that was in the dough to craft more paste. After that, I collected the last bits of charcoal and ingots from the forges who were in need of a refill badly. A dough saddle was crafted, and that's when a wild arty showed up, but it got itself packed up. Then a stone run on the dough followed. I rolled around everywhere getting that stone. Up next was a cactus sap farm with my chainsaw right by a blue drop that was landing. Trees were also chopped down with the saw to get enough wood for all the forges. The blue drop landed and it gave me an upgrade for the doetic saddle that I recently crafted. I got back to base and tried knocking out a vulture that was chilling with my tames, but I guess you don't tame them like this because I wasn't able to feed it. I started tossing the stone from the doet all the way into the base to craft more paste, but I also saved some stone to craft foundations, walls, ceilings, and doors for my new base. The cactus sap I farmed got put in the fridge, and then I tried farming rare mushrooms with my hatchet. I'll tell you why soon, but to no surprise, it was rare to get. So I went back to base, killed some vultures who got too close, took the flint from inside the Anki, and used it to make spark powder. Then another wild RG started attacking me, but I used the Anki to swipe or no swipe it. The wood I farmed was placed in the forges, who were now cooking another wave of ingots. I collected the charcoal from campfires and began crafting lots of gunpowder. Now back to the rare mushroom job. I kidnapped the doet and put it to work, but didn't get a single mushroom. My last hope was the Ankilo, who still didn't have a name, so I gave it one, Wanky. After slapping a level 10 Cardinal harassing my bird, me and Wanky left to farm some shrooms. Thankfully, Wanky clutched up and gave me a decent amount of shrooms to tame a kangaroo. Because it was so quick on its feet, it would allow me to find the new base spot faster than my overweight chicken. Did I mention there was a heat wave during all this? No? Well, I placed my tent because my were melting. Day 12 pushed 11 out of the way, but this heat wave was still here. My ADHD hit hard while I was in the tent, so I started emoting. I also did this, whatever you want to call it. Once the superheat left, I picked up the tent and flew to a green drop with a ring. You could tell why the drop had a ring, as its items were ascendant, but what good is it if it's for a lizard and a cat? Me and Wanky found more crystals to get more shrooms because we want the kangaroo to get right. Back at base, the crystal was stored in the fabricator and I crafted more stuff in the pestles as well as the ordinary base chores. Another sandstorm was back and my desert goggles gave me better vision with a catch. 30% of the screen would be black, so I took that trash helmet off for your sake. The forges would surely have a good amount of ingots by now, so I collected them. In fact, 200 ingots were collected and used to craft an oil pump as well as 4 billboards to trap the kangaroo later. A little problem was the saddle for the Procoptodon, which required fur, meaning I had to find wolves or a sacrificial kangaroo willing to die for another brother to be saddled. This quest for fur took me to Red Obelisk, a place crowded with creatures. After killing a raptor at Red Ob, I figured why not farm some pearls now that I was here, and that's when I caught a kangaroo lacking. I gave it eternal peace and harvested 27 fur from it, a good amount but not enough. A few moments later I squared up on a kangaroo and coordinated in. This one was harvested with a chainsaw and gave me more than enough. Later a Lemantra earned a death certificate because I wanted chitin and silk from it. A sandstorm hit again as I was flying to a purple drop with items less useful than these subtitles. Furthermore, a pack of hyenodons was unfortunately spotted by me. They went from a pack to packed up because not only do they give good XP, they are lumps of walking hide. With my chainsaw I was able to get 300 plus from just one hyena. Next, a pack of raptors was bullying a Morellatop's mom and her baby, but only I was allowed to commit war crimes, so I took revenge for the Morellatops and flatlined the raptors. The cherry on top was me adopting the baby as one of my own and feeding it berries, but then I completely abandoned it to grow on its own. Moreover, the pearls around Red Ob all got yoinked. I didn't want to waste my stance here. Finally, I moved on from Red Obelisk after not finding a single decent level kangaroo, but not to worry, the rest of the map was waiting for me, like this green drop waiting to be looted. It had a cloth blueprint. Now hear me out. It had more heat resistance than my desert cloth armor, so I saved it for later. Not too long after, a level 50 kangaroo appeared. Now you might think this is down bad low level, but I was down horrendous. I easily trapped it as it was already in a corner, placed 50 more billboards just to make sure, and began shooting trank arrows until it snoozed. By the way, the shrooms were still at base because I didn't want them to spoil. The shack wasn't too far from here though, so when I got back I accessed the smithy and crafted the kangaroo saddle, collected the shrooms, and flew back to the roo. Day 13 I got back to the kangaroo. Surely by now it was hungry enough to instantly tame, but a hungry pack of raptors showed up. Dealing with them was easy though. The roo was tamed, I saddled it up, and together we looted a blue drop with some adobe structures. With its incredible hops we got back to base in the blink of an eye. As per usual, a wild RG flew too close to my base's borders, which were closed, and crossing them was rewarded with afterlife. Inside the base I grabbed all the structures I needed to build my new base. I grabbed the canteens, and left again in search of a better future. The quest for a new base started with a blue drop that had some pants. Anyways, the first contestant for a base spot was this place with huge stone spikes. I hanged around for a while to visualize a future in this real estate. There was also an explorer note here, and the dunes were my next door neighbors. However, next to it was this church, which was far more attractive. I walked inside and a great idea kicked in. What if I saved up on crafting walls, because the church would be the walls? This was a smooth brain IQ play, but you'll realize why soon. Anyways, I placed all my foundations and marked down the coordinates for this location. One day I shall return. On my way back to base, a yellow drop called for me. Then a sandstorm hit, but my kangaroo didn't care. It could still hop forward at the same pace. The yellow drop had organic polymer, so I couldn't cry about this one. Another yellow drop appeared, only this time the sandstorm had left. Oh, and the drop had a ring, of course. Another Doed saddle upgrade. Let's go, guys. I kissed the drop in the forehead, took my items, and peaced out. Back at base with the boys, I made a plan to move out. First, I picked up the fridge, then I collected all the resources needed to make cryopods and flew to Red Obelisk. The obelisk was being guarded by a scorpion. Keyword was. It was only when I began crafting the pods that I realized I forgot to bring electronics to make a cryo fridge. Nice. Back to base it is. But Imian, you said kangaroo was faster. Why are you on Fat Bird? There's a literal skyscraping mountain between me and the obelisk, okay? It's easier to fly right above it. Anyways, back at base, I filled up the kangaroo with items so it was ready for our pending relocation. Smithy got emptied and destroyed, Pestil's bed picked up, generator destroyed, fabricators got emptied, and forges also picked up. And my teams were overweight, so I whistled Victor for backup and filled him up to the brim. Pause. Next, I flew to Red Obelisk again to craft that bloody cryo fridge. The obelisk had a new security guard, and after tonight, don't need another one. However, it had a baby, and it was high level, so I claimed it and called him David. The cryo fridge was crafted along with more cryopods, and the night allowed the pearls to shine through, making it dumb easy for me to farm them. That was until a crocodile violated my rights. Unluckily for him, he didn't know I was a Florida man, so I violated its existence. I mean, the thing literally disappeared. Day 14 and I was still at Red Ob looting all the shining pearls like a goblin until a literal mantis showed up. I don't know how it made it here from the dunes, but it was free polymer, I guess. There was one slight inconvenience. A storm was ongoing, and remember, chainsaws need Wi-Fi to work here, so I just kept whipping up all the pearls in the lake, which turned out to be a hefty amount. As soon as the storm ended, I disintegrated that poor mantis. I was about to say back at base, but it's more like back with the homeless. I cryopotted the Doedic and the Yankee, looted a green drop that landed next to me, and then crafted a smithy. That's when it was time to fly back to the church. As I arrived, the last remaining brain cell in my smooth brain had one last good thought. How the hell will I farm anything when I live in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Enlightened by my realization, I picked up all the stupid foundations I had placed and left. Thank God, inshallah. The sad part was trying to find a new spot with a bird that could get gaffed by my grandma in a wheelchair. I considered the top of this mountain with a bunch of crystals, but it was low-key mid, so I moved on until I found the one. The Anvil by Green Obelisk. I loved this place and how it was flatter than Taylor Swift on a cut. After a couple of failed builds inspired by my non-existent building skills, I arrived at this final design. If you think it's ugly and disgusting and I should build something else, womp womp, my boy. Fine, later I'll do something that doesn't turn you blind. The walls were placed in one ceiling because I had no more. The smithy, pestle, and fabricator followed up, which allowed me to empty the turkey's inventory. Outside at the edge of the foundations, the forges were placed. Inside, I put the cryo fridge next to its cousin. Outside again, the generator got placed to power on this whole joint. The base was ready, meaning I could fly back to the boys and pick up more stuff. On day 15, when I got back, I figured the best way to go to the Green Obelisk was probably by whistling the RGs and mounting the kangaroo. 50 hops later, we arrived at our destination. Because the kangaroo didn't have wings, they had to stay down there with Victor. I guess I'll build a stairwell for land dinos to walk up to the anvil later. The ballista turret I got from a drop was demolished for some ingots, and my boy Hopper was getting bullied by a pig down there, so I had to come back him up. There was another pig which I baited down the hill, and it actually did some cool skateboarding on the border's mesh. A furnace I had from a drop also got demolished, but wasn't too useful. After that, my chainsaw was repaired. Also, the RGs made love and dropped an egg. Luckily, right outside my base, there was an oil vein, so I slapped the pump right on it. While searching for another vein, a red drop spawned near me, but when I got to the drop, I realized it was in the mesh. For your sake and my own, I slid into the mesh to find out what I could have had. Turns out, pretty useful stuff, man. However, I didn't take it to avoid any Karens in the comments saying, "You're a dirty cheater, that loot wasn't legit." On my way back, another vein was found, not too far from my base. Because I had an elevator platform, I crafted a track to place it and demolished it for some ingots. Another electrical storm arrived with tons of lightning strikes while I still didn't have a roof over my head. This storm delayed me a good bit as I wanted to either farm polymer with a chainsaw or throw out the Yankee to farm metal. Two things I couldn't do with the storm. The final verdict was to hop on Hopper and hop towards a blue ring drop with stone structures. Time spectacularly spent. At least the storm ended during this process. Back at base, the pump sucked up a respectable 14 oil by now. I released the Yankee from solitary and crafted that Mastercraft cloth shirt, BP. Subsequently, day 16 kicked in. I took Wanky with me for a metal run. The metal nodes around the anvil were mad poor, giving about 100 per, but I knew the pillars had lots of metal. metal. On my way there, I farmed the node next to one of my oil pumps. Then I opened the pump and it had a solid 9 oil. The metal one continued as usual with 100 metal per rock until I hit these nodes next to the pillar that gave me 350 metal each. Now we're talking. Eventually those nodes ran out though, so I flew back to the base, parked the Anki facing the forges, and dropped the metal to distribute them all into the forges. The metal was farmed, but the fuel wasn't. Me and Jose flew down to farm a couple of trees until we had enough to fill all the forges up with wood. Then I realized the Anki had a good amount of stone and flint from the metal one, so I put it on to pestles to make spark powder. More metal had to be farmed, so me and Wanky went for a second round. Halfway to the pillars with metal, I looted a green drop with another Mastercraft cloth PP. However, as I got there, the heat turned up and my character was already half health, so I dipped back to the base and decided to farm later. After a quick look around, I realized half my base was still not built, and because clay is needed to make adobe, a chemistry bench would be really helpful now, which is why I turned it into my next goal. Ignoring my low health, I returned to the pillars to farm a ton of metal with the Anki. 2,000 metal later, I returned and filled every forge with at least 300 metal. A fertilized RG egg was just sitting here, so I put it in the fridge. The Doid who was still in a cryopod got released, but only to farm slave a bunch of sand, which I needed to make clay to make adobe structures. It wasn't long before I had more sand than I could carry. The sand got thrown into the base and then the pestles, but before crafting clay, I still had to get cactus sap. Remember the oil pump? Well, it had worked out 96 oil by now, which was nice. I also tried chainsawing a cactus tree for sap, but an electric storm did not allow me, so I resorted to the kangaroo who could farm a ton of cactus sap from these special bushes. The only problem was I didn't know where these bushes were yet, or what they looked like. The clock hit day 17, but luckily my friend Danae was watching and guided me towards the cactus bush, which gave me sap. Now that this special bush had been identified, I could easily find more. Red Obelisk had a ton of these, so that's exactly where I went. A few hops later, I was surrounded by these bushes. I was getting up to 1,000 cactus sap every couple of kicks. Hopper was nearly overweight with the sap, but for a good reason. We had farmed over 5,000 sap by now. On my way to a yellow drop, things got a bit sus when a pack of terrorbirds and wolves chased me down, and instead of clutching up my hop away, I failed it and fell back down with them, but eventually I made it out. The yellow drop, however, made me regret surviving and making it up here. It had the literal worst weapon in Ark, the fabricated pistol. To prove it, I looted it and tried killing a Morellatops that was probably low level as well. After shooting it 26 times, the Morellatops G was completely unfazed without a visible scratch, so I put the pistol exactly where it belonged and spit on it. On my way back to base before jumping off the cliff, I saw a chubby Listro just living its life. I told him he was missing out on this thing called flying, and he asked me to show him, so I did. Back at the anvil, Jose was waiting for me to use him to get back up since Hopper can't hop high enough. After looting some ingots from the forges, I was able to craft a compound bow along with some metal arrows to kill Mantis later for polymer. Again, the Anki was yoinked to farm one of the resources I still needed for the camp bench, Cristal. Luckily, the pillars in front of me were filled with Cristal, saving me hours of flying time. But a sandstorm hit just as I was flying, and I could not be asked to fly around at 0.2x speed, so I put down my tent and just stayed in there until the sandstorm ended. That's when I picked up the tent and continued the crystal farm. My jerboa kept making those annoying sounds. I figured, why do I need a warning for a storm if they come around anyway and I can't do anything about it? The conclusion I came to was skydiving without a parachute, an act that triggered karma to show up, but unlike the jerboa, I had parachutes. One more issue, however, I couldn't see my RG and I didn't have grapples to get back up. A last resort attempt to whistle the RG back to me followed. Right before I could lose all hope, the Mandem himself pulled up and I saddled it midair. Even the Anki had followed, but since it didn't have wings, it just fell straight down. Coincidentally, an Explorino was down here and I collected it while on the Anki to give it experience. A few more crystals got cracked and then I flew back to base. All I needed for the chemistry bench was paste and polymer, which meant a trip to the dunes was imminent. The sap and sand was merged to make some clay, while in the pestles, then all the metal from forges was brought into the base. My canteens were refilled in the green obelisk pond, and I tried going into the dunes, but it was too hot. With the clay I crafted earlier, I was able to craft the missing ceilings for my base. I had been roofless for long enough, to be honest. When the night arrived, I flew into the dunes with the RG and found an oasasaur, a huge thing that can float that also has legs that looks like a crab, but I wouldn't be able to tame it for a while, so let's keep moving. After flying around for, precisely 30,000 hours, I could not find a single mantis. Nights were very short as well in the dunes, so I returned back to base before things got heated. I made it back to base on day 18 to refill my canteens and then stored them inside the fridge so they could freeze. Outside of juvenile Argentavis beat the odds of being born in these scorching hot conditions, so I claimed it and called him Gilbert. One of the canteens got the ice cube logo, which meant upon drinking it, it would increase my heat resistance. Gilbert got imprinted with a cuddle and I mounted Jose to head out into the dunes, but remembered to get on Hopper instead, who was way faster. Although there was sunlight, the dunes weren't burning me alive because after each night the global temperature drops down and wouldn't rise back up for a while. In my search for a mantis, I found a death worm and an alpha death worm. I didn't stick around for either of them. The new dino called the Fossilucus whatever was spotted, but it was instantly beefing with me, so I left them alone. By the way, the whole point of going into the dunes was to find mantis, but until that point I had never seen a single mantis yet. Until I made it to their common spawn, the dune area around Red Obelisk. Here I found plenty, and the killing spree with my compound bow began. Arrows do plenty of damage to these critters, so my humble amount of 20 arrows put in enough work to get all the polymer I needed for my chemistry bench. With that being said, I also got plenty of chitin to make paste, which is the other resource I needed for the bench. I had grown tired of the dunes, so I started going back to base. When I got there, I made an extra pestle that I used to craft cementing paste. Then the polymer got put in the fabricator. Halsey and Stoner got to work for some stone because it ran out while crafting paste, and we needed more paste for the chem bench. As you can see, this base was too dark now that it had a roof, which is why I crafted a lamppost and placed it next to the fridge to give the room some clarity. And finally, soon after, the famous chemistry bench was crafted, a pivotal point for exponential progression. 3 air conditioners were also made and placed outside. More lampposts were crafted to provide extra lighting. The last thing I wanted to make was a vault, so I walked to the forges to collect ingots, but first I shot a flare gun into the sky because yes. A few moments later, the vault was crafted and placed outside. Right next to it, the chem bench and a lamp in between for more lighting. Day 19, it was time to transfer all the loot from the pestles into the chem bench. Then I picked up the pestles, which would never again be placed. The vault got its first bits of items put inside, and I looted all the charcoal in the forges to make gunpowder in the chem bench with it. Another juvenile RG was growing, but I ignored it for now. A bunch of clay started cooking up in the chemistry bench, and I picked up these 2 walls to turn them into windows, which allowed me to access the vault and bench from inside. With my RG, I flew down to farm more wood with my chainsaw, and I looted the oil pump, which had a good amount of oil in it. The wood was stored in the vault for now, and then I took the Doedicarus to the crystal pillars to farm plenty of stone. I also hit the obsidian rocks, which gave me 300 stone per swing. Back at base, I tossed all the stone into the chem bench and made spark powder. The last thing I needed to craft adobe structures en masse was thatch, so I chainsawed these cactus trees, which only gave thatch and sap. A couple of trees later, I returned to my base and grabbed fiber, wood, and clay to begin crafting adobe. I came to the verdict that a 5x5 would suffice my humble needs, so I crafted 25 adobe foundations and 12 large walls for now. This time I wanted my base to be at the edge of the anvil to make a balcony possible in the future. I placed the foundations down along with the walls I had and the adobe gate, which was perfect to let bigger dinos into the base later on. To finish the base, I farmed more sand on the doed to make some more clay. After some more clay crafted, I reunited the resources for adobe in my inventory and crafted the missing walls for my base and placed them down. Then a light-hearted wood farm took a dark turn when a pack of raptors attacked me while I was encumbered by the wood's weight, but I dropped it all, got on my RG and stomped on them raptors, and then I recovered the wood I had dropped earlier. I crafted some adobe walls, a big cellar door, and 25 ceilings to finish the base. Day 20 was when I actually placed down all the structures including the big cellar door, and the base was complete. I learned the adobe railing engram and crafted a bunch of them. They would give the roof of this base a nicer touch, and it also prevented my clumsy self from falling from time to time. The mating on RGs was disabled to avoid more juveniles popping in out of nowhere, and the new base was waiting for me to put it to use, so I picked up the walls and ceilings of the old one. Then the smithy got emptied, picked up, replaced, and refilled in the new base. Next up was the vault, again emptied, picked up, replaced, and refilled. Same thing for the chemistry bench and the generator as well as the lamps. The rest of the structures got moved until all I had left was foundations, which I picked up to patch this hole in my new base. To finish my weird crafting station, the fabricator got placed down. I tried being different and not just placing structures at the edges like you always see. I could also walk through each side, which was cool, right? All the forges also got picked up because they were too far now, and I replaced the adobe gate in the middle because I thought it looked better there. A few lamps were placed at the front porch to provide light because the stupid sun was behind the base and created a very dark shadow. When I decided to place the forges in the roof, I probably invented the greatest roof you have ever seen, admit it. But they were all empty, so I flew to the pillars with Wanky to do a nice metal run to fill all of the forges back up and build a better future for ourselves. It's day 21 and the metal run has progressed a great amount. I had over 2 rows of metal, but while farming, these stylists started harassing me and Wanky, so we had to relocate. Soon after, a yellow drop with a ring appeared with a 200 armor Lamantria saddle and some cluster grenades. A jerboa family was used as a test subject for my newly acquired nukes. The bombs passed the test and the jerboas passed away. Back at base, I landed on the roof and placed the Yankee in position to throw the metal later. But first, I organized the pigeons in an Indian line because their disorganization was killing my OCD. I checked what I needed for the industrial forge, but but I only needed everything. Then I farmed a bunch of wood with my chainsaw, and every time I touched the RG with the chainsaw, it would get sent to Narnia. Anyways, back at the rooftop, I filled each forge with wood and metal to start smelting. Wanky got parked properly in his own corner, just like the Doedic. The base still looked dark, so I placed another lamp. My chainsaw got repaired and metal arrows got crafted to prepare for another poly run in the dunes. And I went to Green Up to refill my canteens, but a raptor army was guarding it, so I went to a corner of the pond to get water and avoid getting railed. I wanted to improve from a wooden shield, but riot shields required too much poly and metal shields required too much cementing paste. In other words, I was still poor. The turret ammo started getting crafted because sooner or later I would have to visit the Wyvern Trench, and I crafted an extra adobe foundation for the 1x1 fob I would bring to the trench later on. The cactus sap got moved from the camp bench into the fridge so it could preserve better, and my new pieces of armor got covered by the outlaw skin. No matter what happened, I had to stay dripped out. Finally, the time to get on Hopper arrived, and we went out towards the dunes to kill mantis for organic polymer to make some turrets when we got back. When I got to Red Obelisk, a storm was underway, and a mountain was between me and the dunes. The storm created a fog that didn't allow me to see 5 feet past me, so I had to climb all the way up the mountain, and after plenty of failed jumps, I eventually got around and made it into the dunes. Day 22, me and Hopper were in the middle of Saudi Arabia looking for mantis. My compound bow dealt like 200 damage per arrow. The mantis don't take that too lightly. A couple skips later and a mantis duo could be seen aimlessly wandering about in the sand, so I nailed arrows onto their mantis foreheads and skinned their exoskeletons for chitin and polymer. Later I resorted to building Arthropluera, which were a much better alternative for chitin. While strolling about in the desert, a red drop appeared. When I arrived, I made sure to do my lucky emotes before opening it, as it was factually proven to improve my loot. Source? Trust me, bro. I opened the loot and look at what I got. Yeah, maybe my emotes didn't work out this time. Then I found another mantis duel, and Hopper showed me why I should never skip leg day by giving the mantis wings. After a Robin Hood display of 100% compound bow accuracy, I gave the mantis first row seats to a Michael Jackson concert. Yes, mantis plural is mantits. Anyways, curiosity brought me to the Wyvern Trench, and an Arthro stripped my clothes off and turned me into a late night stripper. I was shirtless, pantless, but I had my stripper hat on still. Then I got up close and personal with the trench. My fantasy was to steal an egg that was close to me, but like I said, fantasy. Ain't no way in hell I was getting into the trench with a kangaroo and making it out. With all the poly I needed now farmed, my return to base started. There was also a fog that didn't let me see anything, except for an explorer note that got in my way. Eventually I made it back to the anvil. I put all the chitin on the bench and crafted 400 paste. Somehow down below, Hopper got clapped by a raptor. I guess I'll have to tame another kangaroo later on. Rip Hopper, it was nice while it lasted. After leveling up an RG into health, I crafted another RG saddle because I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna get turbulent when I try to steal wyvern eggs on these pigeons. Then I looted the oil pump, which had nearly 200 oil, and after farming some stone, I was able to craft more paste. All I needed now to make turrets was ingots, and they were waiting for me in the forges. I got on the roof and started looting all the ingots until I had a total of 1,000, more than enough to make 4 auto turrets. And I put gunpowder in the fabricator to start making turret ammo. I also crafted a new set of desert armor to stop walking around naked. The ammo crafting was paused so I could craft an industrial grill. I placed it next to the generator and put all the raw meat inside to start cooking. I collected the turrets and structures I would need to bring with me for the attack on the Wyvern Trench, and after waiting for the final bits of ammo to craft, I headed out on the pigeon with 2 more pigeons following me. Day 23 started while I was still halfway in my journey towards the notorious Wyvern Trench, but it had nothing on me. In fact, those wyverns were about to realize how much of a menace I could be. Never underestimate the power of a man and his pigeons. Before arriving at the trench, I looted a yellow drop. Not gonna lie, I tried making a joke for this one, but got stuck on it for 30 minutes and nothing funny came out, so here's a picture of a humpback whale. I realized I flew to the wrong side of the map. The trench was in fact all the way on the other side of Red Ob. Regardless of my unawareness, I made it to the right place, and there it was. The Wyvern Trench that I was about to conquer like Napoleon with an oversized pigeon and some pea shooters. I almost built my turret trap on the mountainside, but it didn't look pretty. That's my biggest reason. So I flew to the opposite side, which had the dunes that did look pretty. I got as close as possible to the trench and placed down the adobe 1x1. Then I put the generator inside and the bed outside. Lastly, the turrets got placed on the walls, and the 5th turret got placed on the ground facing the Wyvern Trench. After filling each turret with ammo, it was time to dance with the devil. Like a man, I dived straight into the trench and immediately got my first egg, a level 55 poison wyvern. Not ideal, but I still looted it without hesitation to get the attention of all those winged devils and bait them to my death trap. The talons were looting off of each of those wyverns because I'll need them later to start the boss fight. And I didn't let the hide go to waste by chainsawing the wyverns as well. Back into the trench in search of my next egg, I found another poison wyvern, this time a solid level 95. Once again, a couple of wyverns followed me back to their own deaths and a poison ball struck me, but I took it like a champ. Nevertheless, I had to respawn so I could have full health again and avoid dying from heat. After looting all the talons, I went back into the trenches, but a fire wyvern attacked me, so I filled him up with lead. The next egg I found was also a poison wyvern, but sadly a level 15. This could be used for experience later on, so I still looted it. While staring down at the trench, I attracted the attention of more wyverns than I could handle. I looked behind me at all those wyverns and instinctively knew right then and there that me and my pigeon were absolutely cooked. But I came back on the other RG, stood on business, and baited the wyverns into their own demise again. Then I retrieved my items and continued my search for a worthy egg. My hope spiked when I saw a lightning wyvern egg, and because of no wyverns working overtime to guard it, I was able to peacefully land right next to it. When I read the numbers 2 and 0, I realized why nobody cared about this wyvern. However, when I looted it, Mama Lightning pulled up and tried turning me into a spliff, but instead overdosed on lead. Thanks for the talent, bozo. Back to the trench, I went with my hopes still high for a good wyvern egg. Instead, all I could find were empty nests or eggs with more security than an American airport in 2002. A thing called wisdom kicked in and told me to stop testing my luck. I picked up my turret trap and promised to come back when one of my poison wyverns grew up. Day 24, I was back at the trap house with 1 RG less than I had left with, but we don't talk about that. All the prime meat I farmed from those wyverns was brought back and cooked on the grill. An old corpse of mine had to be cleaned out from the base, and I placed a turret, but I picked it up just to not kill my wyverns on accident. I dropped an egg by the ACs, but I didn't have enough to incubate. I couldn't make another air conditioner either because I was out of electronics, which forced me to think like a poor man. That's when the standing torch came to mind. After farming like 12 torches, I flew back up and placed them right by the ACs to provide extra heat. Then I put fuel inside each of them, dropped the wyvern eggs, turned on about half of the torches, and that was enough for the wyverns to incubate. The other trash eggs also got dropped as the poisons were born. I named one Trix, and the other, who was slightly worse, got the worst name, Puke. To avoid crowding the base, I whistled them both out, and I picked up the trash eggs seconds before they could hatch, as I had different plans for them later. One wyvern asked for milk, which meant I couldn't imprint it, but the other asked for a walk, and that was something I could work with. The Oasisaur wouldn't be tamed just yet, but since I had to sacrifice a tame for it, I started hinting who I would use by renaming it the Sacrificial Lamb. Trix asked for a cuddle, and who wouldn't? I mean, look at that face. The next imprint was wyvern milk, which meant this was the end of the road for Trix's imprint at a puny 33%. Back at the rooftop, the forges were emptied for the last bits of ingots they had. As you can see, I was still far away from making an indie forge, but some arrows were right within my reach. Stone was in high demand, so why not go farm some more on the pillars? I don't want you to start snoring, so I'll skip the stone run, but it was a it was a fat run. Look at all that stone. Day 25 and all the stone got placed in the camp bench for future use. The 2 wyvern eggs with lower levels than my rank in siege got dropped outside the base to incubate, and they weren't going to be around for long. They were quite literally born to die. 20 levels into my wyvern, never tasted this good until I overheated and flatlined. After spawning back in, I applied most of the levels into stamina and a few into health. The other wyvern called Puke was still being ignored because he was just there in case Trix somehow fumbled. Even though there was a heat wave, I set sail towards Red Obelisk to farm silica pearls. Before starting to farm, I eliminated any possible threats like these crocodiles that like jumping at my face and dismounting me. I'm sure we've all been through it. While standing on top of the wyvern, I whipped and was able to collect most of the pearls that were in the water. A few still had to be hand farmed while swimming. I also collected the other pearl spawns that were on land, and I stayed here for the next 10 minutes just constantly switching from one spawn to the other as the pearls respawned. Later, I agreed with myself that the lake had been deprived enough of its pearls, so I head out back to the base, but not before looting this awful yellow drop. Awful except for the awesome cluster grenades they had, which I tossed around at jug bugs for fun. But what started as quote-unquote fun turned into a killing spree. How dare the bugs have the audacity to survive my bombings? Anyways, back to base. La la la. When I got home, I started crafting a bunch of electronics and then went back to the trench to find more wyvern eggs. I clapped a level 25 lightning wyvern in a 1v1, then looted a level 25 lightning egg to bait all the wyverns away from the trench into the sky. Then looted another egg, this time a level 50 fire. And lastly, I 1v1'd another lightning wyvern to loot an egg in a battle that was too close and not even worth it because the egg was complete potatoes. On my way back to base, I nearly died from global warming, but Greta Thunberg walked up to the fire emoji and splashed it with a non-plastic straw, which ended global warming and allowed me to survive. Round of applause for Greta. Regardless of that, I still placed a sleeping bag to respawn with full health. When I respawned, it was day 26, and on my way back to base, I had to stop by a red drop. It hadn't landed yet, but I still waited patiently for it to do so. As it got close to landing, I got excited, but the drop just kept on going all the way into the mesh. Anyways, next to the drop, there was a yellow one, so I moved on to that. It had cluster grenades, my favorite item to waste, but this time I misclicked and exploded myself. It barely did any damage though, because these things are harmless. Back at base, I cooked all the prime meat the wyvern had farmed, stored random items in the vault, and dropped the new wyvern eggs I got by the ACs. Because I would now craft another air conditioner, I didn't need these ugly torches in my base anymore. More lamps got crafted because the base was somehow still too dark. I forgot to pick up the wyvern eggs before hatching, so I claimed them and then whistled them both outside. The next step was to unclaim them and give them a post-mature abortion, which gave tricks an additional 6 levels. Getting on the roof with an RG got annoying quick, which is why I made a hatch frame with ladders to climb up easily, and I crafted a pair of adobe foundations to place them outside on each side of the gate. It gave the front some sense of I don't know what I'm doing, to be honest. Moving on, me and the Doed hit up some rocks to get that good old-fashioned sand. When I was done farming, I flew right into the base with the Doed. The chem bench was so filled up that it couldn't even fit any sand, so first I cleared it up by moving everything into the vault. Then I put cactus sap in to make an unprecedented amount of clay. Getting the Doed out of the base was a slight struggle as it kept falling off my claws, but I did it in the end. The next task was to farm some wood. Nothing interesting happened. Right after that, I grabbed the sickle and went ham on the bushes below base for 6,000 fiber in a matter of seconds. With all the resources for adobe now farmed, I could craft a ton of structures for my upcoming roof. After crafting the stuff, I climbed up to the roof, picked up the railings, and fell off a couple times during that process. Did you really think I would keep a flat top roof for this whole 100 days? I am not the man you think I am. And I placed the sloped walls, which resulted in the roof looking something like this. I just didn't have enough structures to finish it at the moment, so it would remain a work in progress for now. The forges being on the roof came to an end because of this, and I relocated them to a place where any normal person would have put them. The ground, of course. I also filled them up with wood, but I wouldn't turn them on until I had metal. Day 27 started with me crafting parachutes to avoid splatting the ground in the future. I also swapped my cooked meat diet for prime meat, and I finally crafted my long-awaited metal shield because I was no longer too broke for it. Some grapples were crafted too. My next goal was to make an industrial forge. Although I was still a long way from it, I could always close the gap by going on the fattest metal run I had done so far with the Yankee. I lapped around the pillars multiple times until I ended up with over 3 rows of metal, which is like, I don't know, 300 times 6, 1800 raw metal. Something of a mathematician myself, you know. The roof had item caches on it from the forges, so I despawned them because they made my roof ugly. There was also a random lamp there, which I got rid of. After farming some more wood to make sure all the forges had wood, I started filling them with something more important. Metal. I turned the forges on and let them smelt. More wood got farmed with the saw in order to craft a ton of wooden ramps to finish my roof once and for all. When they finished crafting, I climbed up the ladder and placed the last pieces needed to finish the roof. The hatch frame got turned into a ceiling because I had no interest in going into the attic anymore, at least for now. A heat wave started, which demotivated me from leaving my base, but I still left to green up to refill my canteens. The oil pumps surely had plenty of oil in them by now, so I looted them, and yes indeed, they had more than 150. I still needed paste, polymer, and metal to make the Indy though. The standing torches I picked up left item caches, so I got rid of them by despawning the wood in them. I realized by now that my crafting station was cringy, so I started fixing it by pushing the fabricator onto the wall, and the rest of the structures followed up. Now the base looked a lot more spacious and less crowded. Me and the Wyvern headed out towards the dunes to get chitin for paste and polymer for mantis. Wait, no. Polymer from mantis. On day 28, after I had been in the dunes for just 20 seconds, a heat wave started. The game couldn't have memed on me harder. I was forced to dip after farming just a few mantis because of the extreme heat, giving me no choice than to just turn around and go to base like a good beta male. When I got home, I put polymer in the fabricator and was able to craft a flamethrower along with a pump. The flamethrower ammo was crafted in the chem bench. I tested the flame, but it was tiny inside the base at least. My health was low now, so I sat still on top of the ACs and waited for the superheat to go away, and I visualized on which side the industrial forge will be placed, so I picked up a row of large walls and replaced it with a windowed wall to access the forge from within. When the superheat ended, I returned to the dunes near the green obelisk and started killing any type of bug that got in my way. The main goal of this dune visit was obviously to get chitin. Instead of biting the other plurals, I spit gas balls because biting them damaged my wyvern. When I felt enough chitin was farmed, I returned to base to craft a good amount of paste. And back to the dunes, but this time towards red obelisk to get polymer for mantis. Before I found a single mantis, a red drop appeared. Of course, before looting it, my emote ritual began, and the drop gave me a 180 damage pump. No complaint here. Even better, 3 mantis were just behind the drop, which turned out to be more than 200 polymer. After chainsawing a bunch of mantis families down, I made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre look like a peaceful protest. Safe to say, I had enough polymer and chitin for the industrial forge now. Day 29, I was back at base putting away everything I farmed, and then I emptied the forges to bring all the metal into the fabricator. I was so close to making the industrial forge, but I had to wait for some more metal to smelt first. In the meantime, a stone run was done to then craft more paste, refilled my canteens, and put the sacrificial lamb to sleep because the time to get an oasis ore was getting close. But I wanted to get other tames first, so I grabbed my Anki and farmed a bunch of narcoberries. Anki wasn't the best for this, however, so I was definitely going to need a new kangaroo soon. In the end, I still got about 300 narcotics crafted in the chem bench. I followed that up with a flint run on the Anki because all that stone I had in the bench was collecting dust. The forges were running low on wood, and now wasn't the time to let them turn off, so I quickly chopped a bunch of trees and patched the issue. At the the peak of productivity, a superheat kicked in, which forced me to stay at base and do base stuff like crafting long neck ammo to making trank darts, and I also ran back and forth in base, anxiously waiting for this dumb event to end, the superheat. I also emptied the forges again for a total of 700 ingots this time. For some reason, at night of all times, the room got insanely bright, something that makes no sense, but whatever. I turned off a few to give my eyes a rest. Day 30 commenced in good faith by removing the superheat punishment, and I grabbed the rare mushrooms from the fridge to go tame a new Procoptodon. That's when I saw a raging Megatherium. I didn't know they spawned on this map. Anyway, I found the level 85 kangaroo right after. This was perfect for me, so I grabbed it with Trix's claws and brought it to the anvil, to which the kangaroo said no thanks and jumped off. But I kidnapped it again, and after struggling to box it in the billboards, I eventually placed one on top of it. It couldn't move. Are you stuck, mate? Let these darts help ya. The roo went night-night, and I picked up the boards. While I was taming, I figured why not do some metal farming, but something even bigger came up, literally and figuratively. A level 140 male Rex with a baby. This was a golden chance to start getting my boss fight army. The 70 trank darts I had on me would surely be enough. I stood on a cliff and kept shooting it until the Rex developed a brain and walked up to me. Never mind, the dumb Rex got itself stuck here. The AI thought it was biting me, so it didn't move from here, which made my job brain dead easy. While knocking it out, a sandstorm showed up, which made the process a bit dramatic, but it's okay. The next move the Rex pulled off when it felt it was getting sleepy was to walk up to the pillar and stand still. But my trank darts were running out, which was a big concern for me. I kept shooting each dart slowly, hoping and waiting for one of them to put the giant beast to sleep, but none of them did. So I took matters into my own hands, literally, and started punching the Rex to sleep. This somehow worked. Never did I forget about its baby, who I would try and claim but couldn't find.
So when I started editing, I realized that the baby Rex was right next to the mother.
But I didn't see it somehow. While flying around, I found another Rex with his son, but since 85 was too low level for me, I let them live their life. I chased down another kangaroo, but this one wasn't so lucky. Its only use for me was its pelt, and unfortunately a kangaroo can't hand it over. Instead, his life had to be handed over. But upon killing it, I got myself stuck between the mesh and the wyvern. Eventually, I was released and returned to base to make a kangaroo saddle. Back at the Rex, who was now doing a handstand while asleep, while inside rocks that I destroyed to get a better view of the Rex performing acrobatics. No matter when I planned long before this, finally started because the Rex was taking his sweet time to tame up. By no means was this a big meta run though, and before returning to base I cryopotted the Rex, who tamed by now, with 51 melee according to Dododex. The ingots from forges got transferred to the fabricator, but still not enough for an indie, and I crafted like 30 ramps for a little idea of mine that I will reveal soon. Day 31 I was still crafting roofs, but I had my fun in the process by hitting the Thriller, the Nutcracker, and a quick giggle. The ramps were done crafting and I hopped on Tricks to start building the support for my incoming new build. That build was a staircase that went from the ground all the way up to the anvil. This was helpful mostly for the kangaroo to come up and down. The rest of my dinos majorly had wings so they could use those instead. After grabbing some raw metal from the forges, I was able to craft a feeding trough because it was about time my dinos got to eating. They've been fasting since day one. Anywho, I was about 8 ingots away from the industrial forge now, so that was nice. My staircase needed a couple more foundations of support at the bottom, and then I could place the final roof needed to make it all the way up. And I collected the final 7 ingots to make the indie forge. First I placed it inside the base right in the middle of this wall. I didn't think much of it and was actually proud of my convenient placement until I walked outside the base and realized half of it was sticking outside. This would insta-kill all viewers with OCD, so I picked it up quickly. Then I picked up all the forges and the foundations they were on. I moved the item caches away from this area to place foundations and then the industrial forge on top. It all fit perfectly and much better looking than the forge sticking halfway through a wall. I put the wood in the industrial forge and moved the charcoal into the chem bench to start crafting heaps of gunpowder. The next industrial item I set my eyes on was the cooker, but I was still far from making that. I placed another bed down cause why not, and then dipped to the red obelisk dunes in search of you know what by now. Psych! I came to the wyvern trench to get eggs. I know you thought it was for Mantis. My first egg was a level 135 fire. Not a bad start at all. After looting it, I baited all the nearby wyverns to the sky and got rid of them. The next egg I found was even better, a level 160 lightning wyvern. Same thing again, I led all the wyverns into the foggy sky and flew back down after leaving them behind. The next egg was beans, level 45 fire. I used it for protein instead. Another egg, this one a level 85 poison who also got munched. My last wyvern egg was looted without even checking the level because I was getting attacked by a fire. Quickly, I ate it because it sucked, while also getting clapped. My wyvern nearly gave out, but I slowly pulled away from the wyverns and somehow survived. Actually, it was perfectly calculated. On my way back to base, I looted a yellow drop with a ring that had a 187 armor ankylosado. When I got home, it was time to incubate the juicy 160 lightning egg, but since it was nighttime, it was too cold, so I crafted a couple more ACs and then it was ready. Then it was day 32. The wyvern eggs were incubating and I was just wandering about, kind of waiting for them. The first egg to be born was the lightning, who I named Zlatan, and then whistled him outside. The next egg was a 110 lightning I got in the trench but never mentioned. And finally, Salava, the 135 fire wyvern, was born. What's Salava? It's saliva plus lava. Anyway, I whistled them all outside, and unfortunately Zlatan's first imprint choice was wyvern milk. I kind of wanted to imprint him, so I cryopotted him and stored him away until I had milk. The other wyverns asked for a walk, which was an easy 9% imprint. The next imprint was a cuddle, and the fire asked for milk, which meant no more imprint for him. Then I got on leg jiggler, walked down my staircase and farmed narcoberries while humbling a pair of wolves with some kung fu fighting. I walked into the base on the kangaroo and dropped the berries in front of the bench. But before making narcotics, I had to go get spoiled meat. So I got on tricks and meat ran a couple of creatures that were by the dunes. Prime meat is the fastest meat to spoil in the game, and luckily all the babies I killed granted me hundreds of it. Hey, not my fault, Ark is sadistic. Also, a sandstorm started as I returned to base. While at base, I repaired my long neck and threw out Zlatan again because I didn't care about imprinting him anymore. I just wanted to use him. Then I picked up the 2 foundations outside the base because they looked horrid. After crafting some trank darts, I got on Jose and picked up Wanky to go on a fat metal run to put the industrial forge to use. I was happy with 2 rows of metal for now, so I returned to put them in the forge. But I was compelled to farm more by these pillars behind Green Obelisk that I hadn't been to yet. First, I flew to the top to see if metal spawned there, but none did, which meant it would spawn at the bottom like the other ones. A couple of metal nodes later, I had another 2 rows of metal, and I looted a ringed yellow drop with pretty underwhelming items. On day 33, I was still farming metal like a maniac, while also slapping the wild creatures around me. When I was done, I flew to the Green Obelisk to fill my canteens, but this time I ended the Raptor Squadron with my Anky's tail and peacefully refilled my canteens. Back at the shack, I tossed all the metal in the Indie, collected what little had smelted, and grabbed adobe structures from the vault to make a trap for taming dinos in the future. The base was looking a little disorganized, so I put the wyverns in a nice line. Then I moved the feeding trough to the middle of the anvil for a better reach, and I made more trank darts because a fat taming spree was on its way. I tossed the level 40 poison wyvern to edge its incubation to 1%, so it instantly hatches in the future whenever I need to kill it for XP. But I had a better idea. I unclaimed the wyverns I raised and then slaughtered them for XP. Instead of killing the other one as well, I unclaimed it but flew out with Zlatan in search of an explorer note. The first note I found was impossible to get with the wyvern. I flew around it, walked all over it, but couldn't get close enough to collect it. So I moved on to the next note, which was halfway across the map in the most beautiful area. With the note now collected, I flew back to the unclaimed wyvern, killed it, and got a bunch of prime meat as well as more than 20 levels. Even I got a level from this. And to get another batch of narcotics, I farmed a bunch of prime meat to get spoiled meat quickly. While farming meat in the dunes, I found an oasisaur, and this one was far too close to base to ignore. So I went home, collected the reincarnation thingy from the wyvern I put down earlier. The bigger and higher level your sacrifice, the easier it will be to tame the oasisaur. And because I was gonna use a level 100 plus wyvern, I assumed I had this in the bag. My insane combo aim allowed me to one-tap the vultures from far, but the progress bar wasn't progressing too much. Each wave the vultures got stronger and one tapping was no longer a thing. At that point I was still confident in my skill until the vultures got even stronger and even my flamethrower couldn't stop them, so I failed my first attempt at an oasisaur. I would be back once I had a higher level animal like a Rex. Back at the Adobe crib, I repaired my desert armor and learned a new hat skin called the Sinister hat. The hat properly filled the role of Sinister with its slick black aesthetic. I moved more metal from the forge to the fabricator to repair my compound bow and flamethrower. More narcotics got crafted too, which meant more trank darts. Then I went in K mode to take a close look at my character. I took off my hat, which revealed my receded hairline. My big forehead caused the PC to crash. But even worse, when I opened the game, the rollback was almost as far back as the hairline. To save you the agony of going through all this day again, I basically did everything again, but I didn't try taming the oasisaur this time. Day 34, I was out and about on Zlatan, looking out for possible new tames to add to the family. But I found the sheep during the process, which was a bunch of free muddin for me. I spyglassed how interesting dinos I found, like this Daeodon, but level 90 still felt low. The next interesting thing I found was a Yudi roaming with his Carno squad, but I'm the alpha of this island, so I put them in their place. Everything I found was useless, but I was itching to tame something, so I darted a jerboa to bed and shoved my berries into it. When I tried looting a blue drop, a rock golem popped up, so I changed my mind. Then I looted a yellow drop, but dropped all the items, until I realized I could electric prod a jerboa for the jokes later. And I also picked up the flashlight, which could be useful in the caves later. Everything's later. Near the base, I clapped a low-level Rex to give way for a new one to spawn. Later. Just kidding. The industrial forge had cooked 1,000 ingots by now, which meant the time for the industrial cooker was close. But later. All I needed was polymer, and that's exactly why I left the base later. Okay, I'm sorry. Farming polymer with this lighting would be easier than ever. The mantis would get instantly clapped and my chainsaw put in the work. For some reason, there were a lot more mantis in the dunes now than before, and one of them gave me a treasure map that I would try looting in the future. After nearly driving the mantis to extinction, I had 600 polymer and nearly 2,000 chitin. I was satisfied with this amount and flew back to the base to allow the mantis to repopulate. A red drop got on the way before I made it to base, but only to waste my time with trash items. Back at my adobe mansion, I crafted paste and made the shovel I needed to dig out the treasure whenever I found it. Before making the cooker, I crafted like 6 water tanks because I wouldn't be able to use the cooker until it had some sort of irrigation. I could have placed it next to Green Hob, which had a lake, but how annoying would it be to leave base to craft med brews? Welcome to day 35, survivors, a day where the industrial cooker was born and placed next to the vault. Now I just had to wait for it to be irrigated by the water tanks. Although rain is rare in this map, it only had to rain once. Then I flew to the nearby dunes to farm some meat and scout for high-level Deodons while killing off the low levels to allow new ones to spawn. When I stumbled on another level 95 Deodon, I figured finding a better one would take too long, so I dropped it in the trap and started knocking it out. I kept trying to hit it on a spot where it received 3 times the normal damage, but only managed to hit it once because the hitbox for it was too small. That didn't matter though, it still went to sleep and I put a bunch of meat in its inventory to tame. Inside the base, I made the Deodon saddle, and while it tamed, I figured why not go find that treasure. When I pressed E on the map, it would show me where the chest resided. When I got there, I was a bit confused as to where exactly it was until I found it and dug it out. Surprisingly, it had a 198 damage pump and good Ryan gauntlets. I was expecting 5 sulfur and 4 pearls, so this was worth it. On my way back to base, I made sure to spyglass some dinos, but they all sucked. At home, I crafted simple bullets to craft shotgun ammo later, seeing as my best weapon was now a pump. After putting polymer and paste in the fabricator, I realized I could craft 2 heavies, so I did. Cause why not, blood? And apparently it rained because the cooker was irrigated, so I got on leg juggler to farm tinto berries. A couple thousand red berries later, I was able to start crafting over 100 medical brews. That's when I found out the Deodon tamed, so I saddled it up and cryopotted it to get it out of the trap. Yes, I called him Pumbaa. If you have a problem, comment it below and I will engage in the keyboard warrior 1v1. Seeing as nothing useful had been found so far, I resorted to taming more jerboas. However, my plan for them were absolutely diabolical and I could not reveal it to you just yet. I tamed the jerboa mom, dad, and son, cryopotted one, put another on my shoulder, and grabbed the last one with my wyvern claws. Then dropped them all together inside the base. The parents were also put to breeding to give their son a sibling, and I built a little platform for myself. Yes, this was related to the jerboas, but I'm not telling you why yet. Otherwise, you'll think I'm weird. I called the new baby Microsoft and the older brother was called Corvette. Day 36 started with me setting the Hellcat to aggressive as well as the Corvette. I unclaimed Corvette and there it was, the first jerboa 1v1 arena in Ark Ascended. I climbed up to my seat and watched the fight from a safe distance, although any distance is safe for these things. Corvette ended up clapping the Hellcat, so I rewarded him by inviting him back to the tribe. Then I got on leg juggler and farmed some berries to fill the trough as it only had meat up until now. After crafting 76 more medical brews, I repaired my long neck, got on Zlatan and headed out towards the red drop that was waiting for me with the most horrid loot ever. So I took out my frustration on a jug bug. Next, I looted a yellow drop with even worse loot, but this time I expected it, so no jug bugs had to take a beating. And another drop which got even worse somehow, stone structures in a yellow. Anyway, I found the water vein, took a sip and tried filling my canteens in it, but the game didn't let me. By the way, I was now looking for a high level Rex to tame, but instead I found the Yudi. Too bad it was low level, otherwise I would have tamed it. The game heard me apparently because the next Yudi I found around the corner was a level 125, and that we can work with. So I picked each of his carnal friends one at a time to decimate them and then peacefully tranquilize the Yudi. At first everything went smooth, just me on the cliff knocking it out effortlessly. Until, well, a fog came my way which covered my entire screen. I had to jump down to look for it and then it started biting me until it broke all my armor and nearly ended me. The fog got worse and I lost the Yudi. A few minutes later the fog cleared away and I found it, but when I tried going after it, a rock elemental popped out of the ground. And now nothing was visible due to the fog, so I had to just wait it out for now. Eventually, and I mean eventually, the fog cleared out and I was back to knocking out the Yudi, who was now close to sleeping as it was running away. My aim was questionable at times due to the Yudi's spontaneous movement. And to make matters worse, another wave of fog pulled up, making this taming process one for the history books. I lost the Yudi's location for a while because, you know, the fog, but a considerable amount of time later the fog cleared and I hit the final shot on the Yudi that would finally put it into deep slumber. Day 37, I was still in the sky waiting for the Yudi to tame. The son of a beep also took his sweet time to tame at a mere 9% per bite, so I distracted myself with a Wyvern Trench showdown. Without any armor but a huge pair of balls, anything is possible. The first egg was a disgusting level 5 which I ignored. The egg right next to it was 80 but still not worth my time. Although usually I would pick it up anyway so a new one could spawn, but destiny got in the way as a sandstorm kicked in. Now I know why I didn't want to take the eggs this time. If you look around you'll realize the wild wyverns aren't slowed by the storm, meaning if I took that egg I would have been cooked. I waited for the storm out on a pillar while face chasing the Yeti, and when it ended, I headed back into the trench. After finding a trash fire, poison, and lightning egg, I came around to the GOAT of eggs so far, a level 170 fire wyvern, just 20 levels away from the max. I took it and dipped while bringing along half of the trench with me. I was satisfied with this egg, so I flew back to the Yeti, who was tamed by now. Back at the crib, I dropped the egg to start incubating it, and I repaired my busted desert armor. While getting the next jerboa Mortal Kombat ready, I realized the fire egg turned into not one, but 3 fire wyverns. Crazy. I claimed them, called them O, Baby, A, and the last one Triple. Then whistled them all outside, and imprinting them was no different than the others. Basically some walks until they all begged for milk and I was too lazy to get some. The next jerboa fight was underway, this time Apple versus Microsoft, and Microsoft won. A new jerboa was born, and I think this one could take down the Corvette. His name was BMW. This fight would take longer due to both jerboas wearing a flak helmet. I climbed up to my seat, unclaimed the BMW, punched him down, and let the fight begin. Both jerboas were squabbling back and forth, but very quickly it became apparent who would win. My boy Corvette still undefeated. The fire wyvern triplets were now fully grown, and I had some wicked plans for one of them. Day 38, I was out and about on one of the fire brothers. I was looking for an explorer to give the fire an XP boost and also kill other wyverns back at base. The first note I found was already taken by me earlier, but I had forgotten. While flying, I reunited with the parasaur I tamed a while back called an improvisation, so I put him to rest. Anyways, eventually I did find an explorer note. Not like I had to fly across the entire map or anything. I didn't level up the fire so we could see all the levels accumulate. On my way back, let's just skip this drop honestly for both our sakes. Back at base, I unclaimed the old wyvern and clapped him for XP, but the wicked plan hadn't even started. The unsuspecting brother got unclaimed and stabbed in its scaly back for a total of 62 levels. Not only do it be your own kind, sometimes it could be from your own womb. Hashtag tough. Anyway, I had better things to do, like this final prize fight between Microsoft and Corvette. I climbed up my seat and got ready to witness such a spectacle. They did zero talking and went straight to biting each other's toes. Both did 4 damage at a time, but still, the Corvette won again. I teabagged Windows 11 and dragged it to the pile of dead jerboas. Then in front of their dead bodies, I proceeded to flex, Fortnite dance, and backflip. Meanwhile, the fire wyvern was being healed outside by Pumbaa. The wyverns that got sacrificed provided a bunch of prime meat, which I cooked on the grill. And when I tried searching for a new ankylosaurus, my game crashed and rolled back to the start of this day. I took advantage of my time travel to change the course of the future. Here's what changed. Microsoft still died, but with a stomach full of lead. Then I found another explorer note for my wyvern, which took like 30 minutes. During a storm, a bunch of tumbleweeds landed next to me and I opened the gate to push them inside. Tumbleweed is what you call these things that does this audio. Day 39, I was back to where I crashed last time, looking for Ankies. Spyglass after spyglass, Anki after Anki, all completely saggy potatoes without a single redeemable aspect. The search went on for ages, taking over 75% of this awful day. Until there it was, my precious, a level 135 Ankilo, currently being beat up by a Sabertooth. I swooped in and grabbed the famous Anki first try with my nasty fire claws. So I flew back to base to drop the Ankilo in her trap. Something that was also easier said than done. I put Corvette in the base and decided to give him a free nap by tossing a poison nade at him, but this guy was cracked and was unfazed by the nade. Because I wanted to get a fully imprinted Anki, I had to go find another one because both of mine were currently female, and 2 females are incapable of bringing a human on this earth without sperm, which is why each gender should stop egoing the other and realize we need each other. Anyway, a level 5 beta male was found, which was perfect because all I needed was the good melee stat from the mom. I'll explain how that works later. On day 40, I was knocking out the female 135 Anki, a process that didn't take too long. As for the beta male, well, he was already slumped by 1 dart. While they tamed, I decided to indulge into painting my clothes to take my drip into intergalactic levels. My outfit got a nice brown glaze all over it. Pause. And I did the dual emote again, which looked cool. The level 5 Anki quickly tamed and I named them the S word, which gets you life in prison without parole in Pokemon's Twitch live chat. I filled the trough again with leftover berries that were still on Leg Jiggler. Then I jumped down to farm a ton of narco berries with my boy Jiggler because that Yeti drained our dart supply earlier. I put the berries on the bench and crafted a bunch of narcotics. In the smithy, I crafted a hanging sign which I placed below my special seat and called it King's Seat. Me and Jose flew down to farm wood with the chainsaw and put it in the smithy. Back to the drip, I crafted orange coloring and applied it to my boots. Then I crafted blue coloring and reformatted the entire outfit to look even drippier. That's when I performed an air drum. I went as far as to paint my shield as well as Corvette's hat. Then the chainsaw along with every single item in my drippy hotbar. I couldn't stop there, could I? Every single saddle at base got painted too with the nice bright orange. The Anki, Doed, Rex, Yudi, Deodon, RG, everything must be orange. Anyway, I hatched the trash wyvern and home runned it with my Anki's tail to give it XP. Then I parked the Ankies together outside to start breeding. When they dropped the egg, I picked it up to incubate it. Twins came out, but they both got the simp dad's melee stat, which meant I had to give them the non-living treatment, with my majestic pump, of course. Then day 41 came around. This was the time for me to stand over the jerboas body and do this. I also grabbed a bunch of raw meat from the wyvern to cook in the grill and put the spoiled meat on the chem bench for narcotics. The Anki popped an egg, so I adopted it and placed it by the air conditioners. The heavy turrets were sitting in the fabricator, so I figured why not place them outside and make my base scary. When I walked back inside, there it was, a newborn ankylosaurus who, despite its low level, got the good parent melee stat. Its first imprint petition was a magenberry. The next imprint it asked for was a tintleberry, and the Anki was now at 40% imprint. While raising the Anki, I grabbed wood from the base and tossed it in the forge to make charcoal. The third imprint was a wok, which got the Anki to 60%. Another Ankylo egg was being hatched now, and I actually got twins with good melee, so why not raise them too? Him Anki wanted another wok, which got him up to 80%. All I needed was one more imprint and it would be perfect. One of the twins wanted a wok, but the other one wanted kibble, which I didn't have, so I took his life. Anyway, on his last imprint, the Anki asked for a wok, but as it was nearly done raising, mid-wok, seconds away from 100% imprint, the Anki unfortunately decided to become an adult. Hopes were still high for the other Anki, who asked for armor berry for its 60% imprint. The Yudi buffed the juvenile for a morale boost, but the dumb Anki decided to ask for kibble, and that was the end of the road. I guess him Anki will be my main choice, but first I had to level him up. So I unclaimed the wyvern for it to kill, but I forgot I had heavy turrets on all targets and they killed the wyvern. By the way, I pumped down Victor with no remorse because I simply could, I guess. I don't know, power got to me. I also made some plant pots. These will be used in the future to feed the Oasisaur some food. And since I just sacrificed that fire wyvern, I used it to go tame the Oasisaur. I put it in the Gaia ritual pond and the vulture started flying. With my 200 damage pump and a better, higher level wyvern this time, I knew I could do it. After the first round, the progress bar seemed to have progressed a ton until I read the dreadful number 49.8. Bro, this meant 2 rounds would be 99%. Just 1% shy away from completion meant a third round was necessary, and we all know how strong the vultures can get. So there I was, round 3. Of course the vultures got too close and started dealing damage, and no pump on this map would save me. I raged out of frustration, as you can see by my mouse movement. I couldn't believe I failed because of a stupid 1% difference. There was nothing left to do here other than leaving back to base, where I got on my Anki and swung another Anki to death for experience. But that wasn't enough, so I went to the trenches to get a sacrificial wyvern. I made it to the wyvern trench on day 42, and the first egg I rawed was a level 10 lightning. After leading all the wyverns near me out of the trench, I went back in to steal another lightning, this time a level 100. The third egg, the time that is of charm, ended up being a level 180. That's 10 levels shy from the max, which meant it would probably be the highest I'd ever find in this 100 days. But I kept looting eggs, mostly garbage stuff to be honest, so it wasn't long before I was back at base with 2 decent level eggs and the beast 180 fire. I had dreams and aspirations for this 180, so I wouldn't just hatch it now. First, I wanted to get wyvern milk for it so that it was raised with 100% imprint and be perfect. So I prepped the lightning Zlatan with a fob to destroy the trench in hopes of killing an alpha wyvern, which gives tons of milk. When the 2 mid wyverns hatched, I slapped them with the Anki's tail to give the Anki 25 levels to pump all into damage, which meant the Anki was finally ready to go farm. This Anki could break the rich metal nodes in 2 hits, while the old one had to swing 3 times. This made the metal run slightly faster. Before you know it, 2 rows of metal were farmed and I could return to base. The wood I put in the forge a while ago was now burnt charcoal, so I transferred it to the bench to make gunpowder. More wood got farmed the typical way and put in the smithy in order to craft a windmill. Supposedly it gives, I don't even know bro, it looks cool next to the base. I don't care if it's useless. Then I made a cart that I could put on the Deodon, which turned Pumbaa into a pickup truck. We did some sick donuts with it and displayed the amount of strength in Pumbaa's calves by being able to hold the cart over the ledge. I was feeling playful, so I looked into the other structures in this new Bob's Tales DLC, like the shootable bottles, a saloon table, a comfy sofa, comfy chair, a piano, 2 swivel stools, and a freaking coffin. The first thing I checked out was the coffin, who could print my body onto it. It could even wear my drip. Now that's called dying with style. But then I clicked take all to get my drip back. The game refused and crashed my PC again. Luckily the rollback wasn't too far this time, and after crafting the Wild West stuff again, surprise, this was the end product. Now tell me, did I cook? Or did I cook? The final touch were the alcoholic beverages placed around the table and the piano, signaling that whoever lived here was a very sober man for sure. I tested the seats, of course, and broke a bottle. It was now day 43, and on my way to the wyvern trench, I found something better. A level 130 female Rex. My one and only Rex was a male, which meant taming this would get my Rex army started. Immediately, I stopped in my tracks to knock this thing out, as I already had my darts on me. There was also a structure I could stand on and shoot it from without putting my health in jeopardy. This process took a while. Alright, we're gonna let that voice crack in. This process took a while as these Rex This process took a while, just like the voiceover, as these Rexes like to eat these darts, one after the other. Eventually, the Rex would finally start running away from feeling sleepy until it started snoring. While it was taming, I was back at base crafting more turret ammo and then looting a bunch of yellow drops like this one with a silencer between useless saddles. The other yellow drop I looted has some metal structures that I would use later on. And the last yellow drop I looted was this one with a lamppost that I tried to recover because it reminded me of this Easter egg I discovered on X, aka Twitter. Supposedly, if I spyglass directly into a lamppost, my character's vision would be impaired for a few seconds. Let's try it out. Okay, that was hard cap. Anywho, a red drop was close and it actually had some sick items like this assault rifle. By the way, the Rex tamed inside the mesh, but after whistling it towards me, I managed to get its head outside and cryopotted it. Back at base, I showed you why the assault rifle is insane. This is an entire magazine emptied on Gilbert. Look at all that damage. I bet Gilbert felt tickled at best. Then on day 44, I enabled mating on the Rexes so they could start dropping eggs to build my manticore killing army. I walked all over my furniture like a madman to get metal from the industrial forge. Mama Rex dropped an egg which I took to incubate by the ACs. I also crafted a pistol to shoot at the bottles and display my gunslinging skills. That's when I discovered the bottles reappeared after breaking. Then the Rex hatched and I whistled it outside. It was a male, so I called him Ray. Ray asked to walk around for its first imprint, which only gives 9%, so best believe I wasn't going to imprint it 11 more times. But I did imprint him one more time because he asked for a walk. The Rexes dropped another egg, but this one got put in the fridge for later. I looked into how kibble is made and I think the time to put down crop plots was coming soon. Funnily enough, I could place them on the pig's carriage. Rexes dropped another egg, by the way, which I also went in the fridge. Later on, I dipped into the wyvern trench with my turret trap on me. Before placing it down, I would try to find that alpha wyvern I highly desired. Alphas are always fire wyverns, so I just had to focus on spyglassing those. When I saw lightning egg, I got extremely greedy, and although a fire was attacking me, I still tried very hard to get the egg. But I got stuck in there for a bit too long, which ended up being my downfall. I flew back on my fire wyvern, fought it for a bit, but got packed up again because now the fire can hit you off of the wyvern. I made it back there again, this time on tricks, which was my last resort, and I killed the wyvern. After retrieving my items, I nearly decided to go back to base, which would have been a wise decision, but instead my buttery smooth brain wanted more. On a beautiful morning, day 45 arrived. I was still looking around for that alpha wyvern that didn't want to show its face, but I figured I should put the fob down next to the trench and start farming talons off of any wyvern that chose death. So I yoinked the first egg that I found and the prophecy became true. A level 70 fire wyvern flinged across, got filled with ammo and fell all the way down into the trench. Then I looted another trashy fire wyvern egg and flinged more wyverns to their deaths until mistakes were made. I engaged in a gentleman's 1v1 with this fire wyvern who birthed fire at me as expected, but I forgot it could hit me off the wyvern, which wasn't healthy for my health. Tired of being victimized by these wyverns and the alpha not showing up to give milk, I decided to hatch the 180 and raise it to unleash a beast on that stupid trench. How to Train Your Dragon sequence followed, with me trying to imprint and raise the wyvern to perfection, who I also named the last straw because it truly was. The first bits of imprint were easy: a walk, a cuddle, another walk. Oh, and I placed down a water tap in the base so I didn't have to go refill my canteens every time I green up. Of course, the wyvern had to ask for wyvern milk, ending the imprint path at 50%. Nevertheless, 50% imprint wasn't too bad. Day 46, I grabbed all the eggs in the Rex and moved them to the fridge. I also got the pig in front of the nearly raised wyvern to heal it later. But there's not much else I want to do besides getting back to the wyvern trench to collect my loot and get revenge by killing that stupid fire wyvern. The piano was waiting to be played, and when I sat on it, I discovered it could actually play music. And by music, I mean Ark's soundtrack. When I got bored of that, I walked outside and the wyvern was fully raised. So I mounted Pumbaa and started healing the wyvern that was more bloody than a used tampon. Back in the base, I put a ladder to get on the attic and I picked up all the ceilings. With the sloped top revealed, the base looked a lot more spacious than before. But then I thought, why not build a usable second floor instead? So I placed some spiraling staircases and relocated my water tap. Half of the second floor was built, but I ran out of ceilings, so I guess I'll finish it later. I rang the bell with the aim of scaring the heat wave away, but it didn't work, so I broke some bottles and waited until time healed my wounds. In other words, the heat wave screwed off. Time to impose justice on this little wyvern that made my day difficult. When I got back, the wyvern was still biting. I brought it to the turrets, which were sadly off and didn't have ammo. I had to walk to my body and then come back to fill one turret to start shooting, while also drilling some slugs into it until it gave out. And I picked up Zlatan's essence because we could reincarnate him when taming an oasis or later. I collected a wyvern egg and baited like 4 wyverns to their death because I still got a lot of talents to farm for the imminent boss fight. For now at least, that would be enough and my job here was done, so I dipped back to base. As day 47 began, I landed on my base. I was joyful to not be in that Forsaken forsaken wyvern trench anymore. All the wyvern eggs I kept during that wyvern trench killing spree were dropped to incubate together, and after that quick talon farm I had 10 poison, 7 lightning, and 13 fire talons. I put Zlatan's essence in the vault after giving him a cryopoded hug and promised to revive him soon. Then my clapped desert armor was being repaired as the wyverns started hatching. First they all got claimed and whistled outside just to be unclaimed and munched on by the last straw, who got a total of 26 levels from this. The prime meat provided by the wyverns was placed on the grill to supply a week's worth of food. Because I was out of spark powder to make gunpowder, I had to go on a flint farm with the Yankee, which lasted a couple of seconds. I started making the spark and then turning it into gunpowder to make more shotgun ammo, and my charcoal started running low, so I chopped more trees down to contribute to deforestation and then put the wood in the forge to burn into coal. While the shotgun ammo crafted, I healed my wyvern with Pumbaa, who even had the idea to make a pig heal other dinos. And what was that man smoking? Think about it. How does a pig associate with medicine in any aspect? Well, that doesn't matter. I was back at the Oasisaur to revive Zlatan and more importantly tame the Oasisaur once and for all. After killing off the first round of vultures, I realized I was still doomed because one wave still gave me less than 50%, which meant that eventually that infamous third round kicked in and handed me another L. This was starting to get embarrassing, so I hope this video completely flops and nobody watches it. In fact, go leave a dislike. Back at base, a lot of wood had turned into charcoal, which meant the spark powder could turn into dark powder. I was ready to go give the Oasisaur a 57th attempt, but I wouldn't use a wyvern this time. Instead, I looked at the Rex and promised him I would reincarnate him as I took his life. Anyway, I also put a scope on the shotgun and I brought Shadow Stake to ease my aim. The satanic ritual began, and after one wave, the Oasisaur was nearly done at a grand total of 99%. Now this is why Ark hates me, because they couldn't just give me the extra 1%. No, I had to do a second round, which is usually cake. But my buttery smooth brain got together with my potato aim to make some tasty Oasisaur mashed potato. And if that is too confusing, let me clear it up. I killed the Oasisaur. Nice. I am actually a specimen. In a world of Homo sapiens, I'm just a hetero sapiens. Back to base it is. Day 48, I was looting a white drop with a ring because it kind of looked yellow, to be fair. When I returned to base, I picked up a Rex egg that was chilling there and I dropped it by the ACs to incubate. In the background, I was running a gunpowder empire to make sure I could craft a ton of shells again because I was never going to stop until I tamed that flying giant Mr. Krabs. The Rex hatched and I called him the GOAT because he was going to be the chosen one who got sacrificed to tame the Oasisaur and then reincarnated like a phoenix. The same promise I gave all the other dinos, of course. Me and the Yankee went on a decent flint farm to keep that orange powder going, and at base I made another fridge that would be used to store narcoberries and Rex eggs later on. A couple more Rexes were born, and to keep their names starting with the letter R, I named one Ron and the other Rachel, but I flipped the genders by mistake. What's a gender nowadays though? Tomato tomato. I won't lie, I really tried getting them to 100%, but it got tough when the Rexes started asking for gourmet kibble. Then the GOAT became an adult, and quickly after a steak. And because I unplugged the life support on the last Oasisaur, I had to fly around the map to find another one. But guess what? I chose to go counterclockwise around the map and found nothing until I came back to Green Obelisk by day 49, and there it was. Had I gone the other way, I would have saved 45 minutes of my life, but here we are. Without further ado, I put the GOAT in the ritual pawn and let's all root for his downfall. From heaven, of course. The first round was the same as all the others. The vultures got absolutely walked over. After the first round, we already had 70% done. It was time for the second round. All I had to do was not flatline the Oasisaur myself and it would all be good. So I developed a safe tactic to ensure the GOAT's return to this world. I would crouch in front of the vultures and shoot upwards to avoid killing Mr. Krabs. And what do you know? It actually worked. Finally. Himothy, the crab, was ours, and the GOAT was reborn as a baby. Anywho, this moment was one to celebrate with a photo mode selfie. Say cheese. A few seconds later, the moment was ruined when I realized I had to take the Oasisaur back to base at its impressively slow speed of negative Mach 45. Shaquille O'Neal at 45 with a prosthetic leg could crawl faster, but there was a yellow drop with a ring next to us, and I had my priorities. Too bad they're the wrong ones. I parked the Oasisaur on the anvil, and it was hungry. Now check this out. Feeding these things involves shoveling a tree out and putting it in one of these pots. If you ever worked at Home Depot, do not open this game. You will start getting PTSD. Later, I finished my second floor, but I still had no clue what it was for. Oh right, for crop plots to start growing plants to make soups, kibbles, and all that fancy stuff. Again, if you work at Home Depot, playing Ark is just an overnight shift. On day 50, I collected more Rex eggs, and when I realized the forge was empty, it was time to get wood, but not just a good amount. No, I did enough wood runs to fill up the entire forge with wood, which allowed me to not worry about charcoal for a while. The Rex eggs hatched by themselves, so I had to give them a late abortion. Then I thought, the new dino has to be tamed during this 100 days, so why not do it now? I searched up a tutorial video on how the taming process worked, and I was ready. I grabbed C4 from the vault and some more from the fabricator. Then I headed out into the dunes in search of this Fossilucicus thing, but a sandstorm interrupted my search, which forced me to stand there AFK for a while. Then my voyage continued without a single fossil in sight. After covering 3/4 of the map, I spotted the pile of sand. I had to sneak up on it and C4 it to begin taming it, but it was alerted before I could, and when I got out, I found out it was a level 20, so I clapped it to find a better one. On day day 51, I hoped this pile of dirt was the new dino, but it was just a random pile of dirt in the dunes. A few moments later, I ran into a red crate, performed my ritualistic emote, and got a pike. The search continued without a trace of this dino for another half of the map, but I did find another red crate, danced on it again, and it gave me a cloth blueprint. Although the loot was dog, right behind the drop was the new dino vibing around, a level 115 as well. I tried picking it with my wyvern and found out it's not possible. In the sky above it, I waited for the dino to dig itself on the ground as the video explained. Then I tried sneaking up to it to place my C4, but I got too close. I waited in the sky one more time for it to dig itself. Then I walked up close enough to place a C4, I detonated it, and the dino was stunned. I mounted it, and all there was to do now was run head first into every rock, bone, and salt deposit that I could find. The control bar slowly drains, and it could reset every time I bash my head against something, which then raises the stupidity. After a while, although I had not lost control, it dismounted me, but this was no big deal. I just had to wait a while for it to dig itself again, and then repeat the process. Back on the dino, I kept running into rocks as the stupidity bar filled up very slowly. Eventually came the time where I had broken everything near me and had to search for new lands. When I saw some trees, I desperately slid to them, but when I got there, I realized there were no rocks and lost the taming minigame. I saw a pile of sand and assumed it was the same fossil. I exploded C4 next to it and then mounted it to restart the process, but this one was getting knocked out a lot faster, which meant it was a lower level. Not too long after, I was able to knock this thing out and found out it was a level 25. Beats me, to be honest. On day 52, I had to walk all the way back to my wyvern who I left behind, and the sandstorm wasn't helping me. After killing some snakes, I had enough prime meat for this fossil to tame at an impressive level 37. I was about to cry about it, but first I tried his tail whip ability, which is basically throwing sand in your eyes. That's this guy's special power. Back at base, I freed it from the cryopod so he could take a look around. The wyvern had a bunch of raw meat from all the stuff we killed, so I put it on the grill to cook. My desert armor, which suffered a couple explosions, got repaired, and an electric prod I got earlier got put to use. All I had to do first was find the jerboa, which is extremely difficult to do because these things are so tiny you need a microscope to find them. An unreasonable amount of time passed, but I found my victim, and without wasting time, I probed it with my prod, which instantly slept it, and I tamed it because I was missing my shoulder pet. When I returned to base, the cooked meat was ready, and better yet, a bunch of charcoal was in the forge to craft a ton of gunpowder. I was also glad to refill my canteens and my water tap and not at the green obelisk. Some lampposts were placed in the stairs and on the second floor to give it some lighting. Because I was running low on ingots, I had to demolish a couple of foundations just to repair my chainsaw. It was about time I farmed my crop plots, so I brought the dough with me, and after chopping some trees and swinging some rocks, I crafted enough crop plots. Back at the second floor, I started placing the plots, and wait a minute, does that say 300% greenhouse effect? I don't know how that's there. There wasn't a single greenhouse structure in sight, but that's hype. The forge was still waiting for metal, so on day 53, I flew to the pillars to do a fat metal run. This time I didn't leave one single metal node alive. All of them got packed up, and I ended up with 3 rows, which totals out to 6,000 raw metal. By the way, I placed a barrel on the second floor. It preserves stuff, I just don't know how well, but whatever. The grill had a good bit of cooked meat, which I transferred over to the trough, and I wanted all potential imprint requests for these Rexes to be in base like primate jerky, which I had not the slightest idea of how to make. So I did what you would do, search it up like a sensible human being. Turns out all I needed was a preserving bin, some spark powder, oil, and cooked prime meat. Piece of cake. Triple. The fire wyvern was vibing in a cryopod in a vault, so I gave him freedom. The first ingots that smelted were used to make simple pistol ammo. I collected another Rex egg, which has turned into a shore, but at least I had like 30 Rex eggs by now. The forge was cooking that wood and metal for me, and it allowed me to craft a ton of shotgun shells as well as turret ammo. The campy day was over and gave way to day 54, which started with me leaving the base to give Central Cave a visit, but not before looting a horrible yellow drop with a ring of all things. 2 things brought me to this cave. One of them was the artifact, which I needed for the boss fight, and the other thing was the chance of finding a dung beetle, which I needed to fertilize my crop plots. But when I got to the cave and realized I had to throw out my kangaroo, I had to go back to base for a cryo fridge and a generator, because you can't throw out cryopods without a cryo fridge around. Not only that, but the fridge had to be turned on for the last 5 minutes, so there I stood and waited until it was time. Traversing the cave on a kangaroo was a joke. Nothing could catch up, nothing could touch me, until I ran into the scorpion brigade blocking the entrance. But they weren't an issue, as I pumped each and every one of them from the comfort of the kangaroo saddle. Then I walked through the choke point to get to the artifact room. I jumped straight down into the abyss, took the artifact, and before leaving I tried looking around for a crate, but there weren't any. However, on my way out, I did find a blue drop with a ramshackle desert leg, which I didn't mind. Back outside, I picked up the fridge, foundation, and generator. Then I cryopotted the room and did back to base on my wyvern. Next, I had to farm obsidian to make an artifact pedestal where I could flex my artifacts, so I mistakenly took a door diggerist to farm obsidian only to realize they couldn't. I came back on the Yankee, which should have been my first choice anyway, and got more than enough obsidian to make my pedestals. I only crafted 3 because that's all the artifacts I would need. One was placed on the table, the other in a corner, and the last one on the second floor. And some research taught me that the dung beetle is commonly found in the dunes, so there I went, and they were in fact common, as I found it after no more than a few seconds. I tamed it with spoiled meat and named it Fertile fertilizer are drawn. Day 55 didn't start all too well. I mean the day itself. It was rainy and cloudy. But me? Oh, I was doing just fine. In fact, I was on my way to a yellow drop that was in the mess for some reason. But I did this thing where I could phase through solids. Yeah, man, I learned it while watching The Flash. It's quite easy if you move your body at Mach infinity times light speed. And never mind, let's just rewind back. That drop was trash anyway. That never happened, guys. Next yellow drop had an ankylosaurus saddle. Wow. Am I supposed to feel grateful? While sitting at base, I wondered what else was there to tame. So I scrolled through the Scorched Earth dinos on Dododex and came to the conclusion that no, there was nothing near to tame. But there was plenty of stuff to do, like moving all these ingots from the forge to a fabricator. A process that I kept doing over 1,000 times in this gameplay, but I spared you about 900 of those. The crop plots were irrigated and soon would be fertilized, but they were missing one essential thing, the seeds themselves. So I took leg jiggler down to the bushes and started kicking until we had all the seeds ready. That's rockroot, savaroot, longgrass, and citronal. I put all the seeds in the plots and now I just had to wait for the dung beetle to cook. But little did I know back then how slow the beetle was at cooking. The base was looking a bit crowded with all the dinos hanging around wherever they pleased, so I parked all the dinos around the edges to give the anvil more space. I also cryopotted the extra ankylos because I didn't need them right now, and I doubt those pixels have a consciousness, so let them stay in solitary confinement for all eternity if it may be. Who knows, maybe they begged to go back in the cryopod because it's actually a paradise. You never know. All the Rexes that became adults without full imprint, including the goat himself, were sent to the Rex afterlife. Because the Alpha Manticore wasn't a boss fight to play games with. Either you get 100% imprint or you get 100% expired. Survival the fittest. Here are the 3 R's. Zero remorse, zero regrets, and I won't say the last R because it would get me demonetized, and not only that, I wouldn't like to offend a certain group of people, but mostly the money. Anyway, outside I placed down a couple of metal foundations and surrounded it with air conditioners. Yes, this would be the new hatching area for the massive baby boom of Rexes that was about to hit. By day 56, the dung beetle still hadn't made one single miserable fertilizer for me. Not only was this ungrateful, it was also lazy on his part. A bunch of turret ammo had been crafted, so I put it in the wyvern because I'd take it to the trench soon to perform a wyvern genocide. More gunpowder got put in the fabricator to craft loads of ammo, and I also made a mastercraft cloth chest piece because it had better heat resistance than my desert armor for some awkward reason. I remembered there were train tracks and engines in the game now, and I might consider it, but look at the cost of these things. They want me to slave away for the next 40 days or something. So I signed the contract and crafted my first track to see how long it was, and honestly it wasn't too bad. I had to make enough to reach the pillars to farm metal easier. Did I say not too bad? Well, it looks like I'll need 10,000 tracks to get there, but I would not give up easily. First I had to make a platform for the train that went all the way up to the anvil, so I farmed and crafted a bunch of wooden pillars. Once the platform was built with ramps to walk onto it, I placed the first train track and maybe the last one because I'm lazy. I don't know, we will see later on. After that, I flew to the wyvern trench with a bunch of turret ammo on me, and once I distributed it all into the turrets, I started baiting the wyverns. I don't want to yap for too long about what happened here. Basically, a relentless wyvern killing spree happened. The trenches turned into an American high school on a Tuesday. Sometimes I take my jokes too far, but hey, you either laugh or report me. 50-50. A lot of talons were farmed from this process. In fact, I now had 18 poison talons, 8 lightning talons, and 14 fire talons. For reference, I needed 20 of each to start the boss fight. Day 57 started off with some lights being turned off. It was way too bright in this house. I picked up my jerboa and checked if the dung beetle had fertilizer, but it still didn't. You lazy piece of literal poop. Do something with your life, you spineless creature. I bet there wasn't a single piece of poop in that trash desert of yours, and I bring you to my house where Rexes are dropping massive pieces of feces, and you have the audacity to collect them, but not give me one single fertilizer after 48 in-game hours. Your time on this earth is ticking, lil bro. Then I healed up my wyvern as it was extremely bloody from the last wyvern trench run. As soon as it fully healed, it was time to go at it again. A lightning egg would be the first egg I stole, and nothing came after me because the only wyvern in render was this one who was stuck. Free talent for me, I guess. Nearby, a fire wyvern took the bullets like a champ, and I also clapped them another lightning. There were no wyverns anywhere near my turret anymore, so I picked them all up with the generator and went out in search of a new place for them. A place preferably filled with wyverns so I could get my job done quicker. And after some research, I concluded the next best spot was right here at one of the wyvern trench dead ends. So I placed the generator and the turrets, but fell in a hole I couldn't get out of. I wasted my last grapple, but it didn't help me, so I came up with a 200 IQ plan. I picked up the foundation and replaced it below me. This got me out of the mess. Later, I looted a wyvern egg, which brought me like a whole SWAT team of wyverns over, and after leading a bloodbath, I calmly looted each of the talons. Isn't it cruel when humans pass tens an animal to harvest 5% of their body, like sharks for their fins to make some trash soup? Good thing I'm a hetero sapiens. Then I clapped a couple of more wyverns by leading them to turrets over and over. Eventually, the only wyverns left were kind of far from the fob, so I had to go and kill them individually and personally. The strategy I used was to shoot them from far with my pump to bring them over and smoked them. This area was clear of wyverns, so I picked up my turrets once again and just started killing wyverns by flying around the scar and pumping those that I found until they died, and then collected their talons. After counting up the talons, I thought I had enough, 20 for each type of wyvern, but when I got back to base, I realized I was still missing 2 more lightning wyvern talons, while everything else was done. On day 58, I put all the turret ammo away in the vault. I checked the dung beetle hoping it had fertilizer by now, but it still didn't. In fact, it was barely collecting poop, so I enabled wandering on it for a while to see if that would give any benefits. My wyvern was half health from all that wyvern trench activity, so I healed it again with the pig. And because the beetle was not dunging, I searched up a YouTube video for a tutorial, but it turns out I just had to wait longer, I guess. Then I remembered I had to farm 2 more artifacts for the boss fight. That's why I was watching a video, because I forgot where they resided. Although I have been playing this game for 8 years, there is some stuff you just don't care about till you have to, like now. Before embarking on said artifact quest, I farmed fiber and flint to make a ton of arrows to craft like 20 grapple hooks in case I got in trouble in the cave or had to do some parkour. I picked Leg Jiggler with the wyvern claws, flew to church cave and parked on the roof, then went inside with Jiggler. My pump with a flashlight came in handy to see anything ahead of us. I already knew this cave pretty well from previous experiences, so I knew to stick to the left while going inside, and I was well aware of the deathfall in the last room, which I jumped right past, and got to the room where the artifact was vibing. Before looting it, I had to clap a couple of cave dinos that were trying to put me down. Then I looted the artifact along with a skin that I might try out later. Finally, I got back on the kangaroo and dipped as fast as I could without ever looking back. To be honest, this was probably one of the easiest artifacts I've gotten in my life. The same goes for every artifact in this map, and I am not complaining. In fact, I pray for Scorched Earth artifacts every day, because whatever the hell they cooked on Ragnarok was just diabolical. I put the artifact in the corner, and when I checked the beetle, it still had no fertilizer. Day 59, and guess what? There was an electric storm. That's it. Pretty much nothing changes because of it, but I wanted to tell you. I looted some med brews that were chilling in the cooker, and after checking the vault and realizing I only had to kill 2 more lightning wyverns for the boss to be ready, I figured why not go and get it out of the way. But some yellow drops got in the way between me and the wyverns, so I looted them, but they sucked as expected. Then the time came around. Racially motivated lightning wyvern killing began. It was quite easy actually. I pumped them from a distance and then bit it with the wyvern to harvest the first talon. 1 more to go. This one got pumped from start to finish and fell all the way down. An RG was going to harvest the wyvern, but I denied it by setting it on fire. Finally, I looted the last talon. Easy. But the trench is close to Blue Ob, and that's where the last artifact was. Well, the cave is commonly referred to as Blue Obelisk Cave. Anyways, after struggling to find it for a while, I went inside with my pump and hoped for the best. I made it all the way to the end while killing some bugs in my way, but didn't find an artifact. Once again, I resorted to YouTube for help, and help it did. Shout out to Domzilla who showed me the way. The artifact was in the back, and then when I got there, I found a red drop with dog loot. Further into the cave was the artifact, and after killing a mantis, scorpion, spider, and a bat, I was able to peacefully loot the artifact along with a torch skin that I might use later. I walked all the way back out, got on the wyvern, and flew to the base where I repaired my desert armor, and the dung beetle still had not made a single fertilizer. So guess what day 60 was all about? I picked up the beetle, threw it on the table, sat on the sofa, and waited. I also screamed at it a couple of times so its constipated self could finally produce some fertilizer. Maybe scaring it was a valid tactic, but bro just stood there unfazed. Perhaps it wasn't making fertilizer because I was never in render for long enough. So I sat there, went AFK, waited, and waited. There was even a sandstorm, so I guess being AFK wasn't a bad decision after all. And after waiting for an entire day, I came to the wise conclusion that this dumb beetle is just the laziest beetle I have ever tamed, and getting a new one might be necessary. If I were this beetle and I saw a new one coming in through the door, I would start praying for better days, because he was about to reach his last one. But even a better solution was the toilet. After all, I just had to poop 36 times for each crop plot to have 3 fertilizer. My script initially said 48, but while editing I did some quick math and realized 12 times 3 is 36. Leave me alone, rar. The toilet required metal though, in its raw version, so I left with the Inky to go farm, but I wasn't going to come all the way over here just to farm enough metal for a toilet. No. Instead, I did a full 3 rows of metal farming instead. What? Sometimes I just script and my brain turns off. I just say instead like 3 times in one sentence. Anyways, I put all the metal in the forge, and like a gentleman, I sat on my chair and waited for the dung beetle to make fertilizer one day. Day 61. What to do? Well, after wandering around the base, I realized I couldn't make the extraordinary kibble because it required honey, and I certainly could not be asked to get that. So I downgraded to the exceptional kibble, which is still, you know, exceptional. So I farmed some berries in the kangaroo in preparation for it, but I still had to wait for the beetle to drop fertilizer. The Yudi got some levels pumped into health and my train track still hadn't advanced a single bit, so I flew down with the RG to farm enough wood to craft one more track. But of course, when I tried placing it, I discovered sky trains would not be possible, as far as I knew at least, meaning the entire elevated platform would have to be scratched and the train track would have to be built on solid ground instead. When I picked up the track, my jerboa fell all the way down. Poor guy. At the bottom, I picked up the first pillar, which picked everything else. Then I picked up the thatch foundations to make space for the first train track. Destination? The pillars. Why? To farm metal on a train, I guess. Anyway, each track cost 500 wood, so you could imagine how much I would have to farm to complete this task. The forge was smelting metal and I transferred a good bit of it into the smithy. Each track required 200 ingots and I had 1000 on me, which meant 5 tracks could be made. Yes, I know. I passed math. I went back to the track to play some more and a wild jerboa was there. I tossed mine away so I couldn't see his brother's demise. The second track was placed, and to place the third one I had to break a tree in the way. I was advancing quite nicely and the track was looking sick already. Then a random thought hit my head, and that was to get a 4th billboard to go trap a megatherium. So I learned its saddle engram and rubbed together enough stone and chitin to make paste for the saddle. My expectations were highly surpassed when I found a high enough level on my first megatherium that was right next to base, a level 95, just enough for what I needed. I placed down the billboards, brought it inside, placed the final one, and then I could just shoot dart after dart until the giant sloth went to sleep. I picked up the billboards except one and I captioned it Megatherium, big enough for anyone to see. Never could my tame be put at risk, so I killed every aggressive dino within 5,000 square meters of my Megatherium, and while doing this I found a massive Morellatops party fighting saber-tooths, and with a single breath I decimated them all. This gave me a bunch of prime meat which I brought back to the Megatherium. Then I did a bunch of emotes on top of it to celebrate. I went back to base to wait for it to tame until it did, in which case I picked it up with the wyvern and brought it back. Side note, I put the dynamite skin on my C4 and look how cool it looks. I put the saddle on the Megatherium and it was ready for war, so I picked it up and went out into the dunes. On day 62, the massive chitin farm began. Little did I know just how good these things were for chitin farming. When I clapped the scorpion, my Megatherium got his bug buff, and when I killed a dung beetle, I got 300 chitin from it, which surprised me. Scorpions gave a whopping 387 chitin, and Arthropleras, oh lord, they gave over 700 chitin each time. I kept running around the dunes killing every invertebrate in sight, except for this dung beetle, who I decided to tame. Maybe it would actually make fertilizer unlike the last one, or maybe I just hadn't figured out one crucial step, which is probably being spammed in the comments by now, but don't worry, eventually I figured it out. The killing spree continued and the Megatherium just kept getting more levels. I was hoping for a death worm to come my way, but none did. The dunes then became uninhabitable as a superheat struck, forcing me to leave, but it was a respectable amount of chitin I had collected by then anyway. All the meat that was farmed during this was placed in the grill, and the chitin in the chemistry bench. Because it was still hot in my house due to me moving nearly every AC to the new breeding area, I demolished the track and put my last 100 pearls in the fabricator to make enough electronics to craft 3 more ACs. The preserving bin made 8 prime meat jerky by now, which I stored in the fridge, and the RG had a bunch of random stuff in its inventory, which I cleared up by putting it all in the vault. With the RG's weight now sorted, I could take the dough all the way to the pillars to begin farming stone from these crystal nodes. That's when I was greeted by a sandstorm, my favorite event in this game. I just love not being able to see or move faster than a turtle on a wheelchair being pushed by a sloth. Nevertheless, the stone got farmed. The obsidian nodes gave me nearly 400 per swing, but an even better alternative was discovered not too long after, and that, my friends, was called a metal node, which gave me a grand total of 850 stone per node. The RG's weight wasn't going to handle much more stone, so I flew back to base. That's when I had a major discovery. The dung beetle, who I set to enable wandering earlier, had made its first bits of fertilizer. That's all I was missing. Happiness overwhelmed my body, so I picked up the beetle and tossed it in the air multiple times while also performing dancing emotes. I was so happy I even started trying out those skins I got earlier, like the torch skin, which was low-key garbage. But the sword skin was absolutely majestic, and after giving it a paint makeover, it perfectly matched my drip. Look at that bronze piece of metal paired up with those blue gems. Oh, and Pumbaa for some reason was onto some black magic, because what I even call this? He was not only half invisible, his head was detached from his body, and the saddle was just floating. Let's just stay away from whatever satanic rituals he's doing. When I put a lot of the stone I farmed with the dough into the chemistry bench, a crazy amount of paste was crafting, and the day had turned out to be 63 by then. Not long after, the rest of the stone could fit into the chemistry bench to make more paste, which resulted in over 1,000 paste being made, and 2 more tracks got crafted in the smithy. I flew down to the tracks and tried placing more, but didn't realize my snapping was disabled, so I confused myself for a while and couldn't place new tracks. After struggling with my IQ for 30 seconds, I figured out that by holding Q, auto snap would would return, and so I placed the new tracks I had just crafted. While I was down there, I knew more wood would be necessary to craft new tracks, so I got to work by chopping multiple trees down until a thunderstorm arrived, which didn't allow me to farm more. Back at the smithy, I crafted 4 more tracks and immediately flew back down to go place them, as I was more excited about my tracks than anything else. But I flew back quickly to bring the dough wood with me, as there were stone nodes in the way that prevented me from placing my latest train tracks. I placed the first one, then sorted down a cactus and clapped a thorny dragon to place the last track I had on me. As you can see, a good amount of progress towards the pillars had already been made, and before I continued down this rabbit hole, I figured why not craft the actual train engine now that I had a couple of tracks to test it out. So I took the Anki to the pillars to farm just enough crystal for the train. I also had to get flint to make 300 spark powder, and there was the train engine crafted. I also made a platform cart to see what that was all about. It took me a second to figure it out, but I accessed the track's inventory and placed the train down. The train was stunning. I was quite impressed. Trying to attach the platform cart was another mess, however. I tried multiple things like putting it in the inventory and so on, but couldn't. And charcoal was required to fuel the train, so I went back to base, grabbed it, and flew back down while a sandstorm had formed. After putting in the charcoal, the train engine could start, and it was quite fast, but it all came to an abrupt stop when a rock got in the way of the track, and after breaking it, we could continue to the dead end. And that's when I discovered how to add a cart, while also accidentally finding out that the train could go backwards, which saves a lot of time. You best believe I named the train Platform 9 3/4 because I was raised watching Harry Potter. Kind of nerdy, but I'll embrace it. More paste got crafted in the bench, my chainsaw was repaired, more wood got farmed, and the dung beetle was really cooking now. Day 64, I remembered I had a barrel. I unsealed it, but nothing really cool happened, so I emptied its inventory. The beetle made fertilizer, which was put in the crop plots, and they were visibly growing, but some plots had no seeds by now. I guess they spoiled, so I had to get on the kangaroo and kick a couple of bushes until I had enough to seed each crop plot. Every crop was essential for our future kibble production. A bunch of meat had cooked in the grill, which I moved into the trough to feed my starving dinos. It wasn't long before I was collecting crops from the plots and put them in the cooker. Later, I got on my wyvern and went out to loot a green drop that had some crops and a water jar that I took a sip from and then despawned. Don't sleep on them green drop, guys. Neither would I sleep on this purple drop that gave me focal chili and a metal gate. On the opposite side of the map, I looted another purple drop with focal chili once again. A blue drop next to it would give me a desert cloth helmet, which I did in fact equip to replace my flak helmet that I'd been wearing for a while now. A few moments later, I found the one and only yellow drop with a ring, and at first glance, it seemed like just a bunch of trashy metal structures, but no, this drop had 2 behemoth gateways. Do you know how many ingots that will give? I had no clue, but I knew it would be a lot. Before making it back to base, I looted another yellow drop with some organic polymer, and finally when I got back, I started by demolishing the small fish, the foundations, the usual stuff, which gave me a few ingots. In that process, I accidentally replaced my adobe gate for a metal one, so I figured it would stay that way. I was too lazy to craft another adobe gate. The last structure came around, the 2 behemoth gateways. Each of them dropped a mind-bending 1,000 ingots, which totaled out to 2,000. This was huge for my train tracks progress. After crafting a couple of tracks, I flew down to start placing them. It took me a couple of tries to get past this ledge, but in the end, it all worked out. I was getting closer and closer to a fully built train track. Day 65, there I was flying back to the tracks after I had farmed some more, and I tried building a roller coaster apparently instead of train tracks as I kept going away from the ground. But foundation support didn't support this madness, so I had to pick some tracks back up and restart. Eventually, after some trials and tribulations along with packing up a thorny dragon, I was able to figure out the track placements, for now at least. The key was to demolish all nature that got in the way so I could build my superficial train track with probably 0 use. Oh, and I tried blowing up the rocks with dynamite as they would back in the day, but the stone was not even flinching at multiple explosions next to it. Back at base, I removed this elevator track below the windmill and collected more fertilizer from the beetle while planting the last seeds needed to complete my indoor garden. Look at those lemons growing in front of me. There was also a superheat, but I didn't care anymore, and after tracking the crafting requirements for the focal chili, I jumped down with the kangaroo to farm the berries needed for the focal chili, which are Amarberry, Azelberry, Medjoberry, and Tintoberry. Back at base, I brought all the berries needed with me to craft focal chili and was able to craft 25. Now I just had to convert all those chilies into yellow kibble. Meanwhile, the dung beetle processed more fertilizer, which I put into the plots while also collecting freshly grown crops. I opened the fridge and took out a bunch of Rex eggs that were about to be turned into yellow kibble, meaning I had no more eggs, so I enabled mating on the Rexes so they could start laying the future generation of eggs. I ended up making about 30 exceptional kibble, more than plenty to imprint all the Rexes whenever they asked for any kibble. If a Rex asked for kibble lower tier than the yellow, I could still use the yellow. However, if it asked for extraordinary, then well, I'd send it to Rex Heaven. The tracks were in need of crafting, but I had no more ingots, which is why I took him Anki to the pillars to start farming metal. Because this Anki was a complete animal, I was able to collect 3 rows of metal quicker than ever. Back at base, I put the metal in the forge, but when I walked inside, I realized I forgot to pick up some Rex eggs, because 2 Rexes literally hatched and grew nearly into adulthood while inside my base. In fact, not only in my base, but within the cooker that I had to pick up just to be able to kill them. Day 66, some metal had smelted, but not enough to make a track. More wood had to be farmed, so I did what was necessary and cut the trees down. And when I got back, I was able to craft a single track, but after waiting for some metal to smelt, I made a second one and flew to the unfinished railroad to place them, but first I had to get rid of these large boulders in the way. When that was done, I could place my new tracks, but I had another hiccup. For some reason, the tracks couldn't be placed because they required nearby foundation support, although they seemed to be close enough to the ground. After multiple attempts and nearly losing hope, I pulled off the perfect combination of twists and turns and angles to progress the railroad with proper foundation support. Back at base, 2 more tracks got crafted with freshly smelted ingots, and once again, to the railroads I went. This time, placing the new tracks didn't take too long, and I could move on to doing something else. The forge had smelted over 800 ingots, and I burnt them all into more tracks, but first I had to get wood, and I was rejected by a thunderstorm that didn't allow me to farm with my chainsaw, and no chainsaw equaled no farming. I was too lazy for a hatchet. Nevertheless, another track was made and it was smoothly placed. Take a look at those tracks, guys. It looks quite stunning already, and I wasn't even done. On the second floor, I collected all the new crops that grew and put them in the cooker. I also added some fertilizer to the plots to make sure they didn't stop producing. Plenty of narcotics were also made with the spoiled meat that I found throughout the base. Day 67. I mean, what a day. It seemed to be just like any other, as I started off by doing the usual base wandering stuff like moving resources from one structure to another, like this metal from the forge to the smithy in hopes of making tracks but being short on wood, and then trying to farm some, but the electric storm still hadn't gone anywhere. And I remembered I was missing one more thing that babies could ask for when imprinting them, and that was cooked fish meat. So I flew to the green obelisk and killed the innocent fish in the small pond. After that, I decided it was about time I began raising the first Rex soldiers for my future boss fight army. So I dropped 3 Rex eggs, but I was tempted by a nearby red drop, and to avoid messing up their imprints, I picked up the eggs to go loot the drop, which had a ring on it. Unfortunately, it didn't live up to its name and gave me some depressing items. At this point, that's living up to its name. There was another drop, however, and yet again it was just as disappointing. But even worse was the fact that my Ark had crashed, and worse than that was the rollback that went so far back I had lost my rights. When I loaded back in and checked the daytime, I realized it would be a long day, but with the power of editing, I was able to spare you my pain. Before you knew it, I was back to hatching those 3 Rex eggs with one mission in mind: get them all to 100% imprint, or at least close. I stood there and waited for the eggs to hatch until they did. Quickly, I claimed each of them and named them the Agent 1, 2, and 3. In preparation of a walk, I set their follow distances to lowest, and while their care timer went down, I collected some ingots from the forge and placed them in the smithy. Then, by pure coincidence, all 3 of the Rexes decided to ask for a walk, a request I easily fulfilled. While their timer ran out, one Rex asked for Mejoberry, and the other 2 still wanted a walk around the anvil. While waiting for the next round, I crafted some medical brews in the cooker, and when the time came again, I walked the Rex, cuddled another, and used kibble for the first time on the 3rd. Because dinos could ask for any berry as well for imprint, I jumped down with the kangaroo to get Verdeberry, Maginberry, and Cyanberry, as I had none of them in my inventory ready. Day 68, I was still imprinting my Rexes with the usual kibble and Azulberry, while simultaneously picking up new Rex eggs that were being laid by Mama Rex. So far so good. None of the Rexes had asked for anything I didn't have, until this smart one decided to ask for cooked prime fish meat. Now tell me, how was I supposed to get prime fish meat on a map where water is a scarce resource? Well, you know how that ended for Agent 1, and now Agent 2 could take his place, but he better not get out of order, otherwise he could go down the same path. Later, another red drop caught my attention, but the loot it contained heavily disappointed me once again, and at this point it was my fault for being this gullible. Back at base, one of the Rexes was humble enough to ask for what I had in my inventory, and the other one got ahead of himself and asked for cooked prime fish meat, so I cooked him instead. And well, I was then down to my last hope, the real Agent 1 and only one. For his last imprint, he requested cooked prime meat jerky, and I accepted. Although it wasn't a 100% imprint, which was impossible with my settings, it was still a solid 80% imprint. As soon as Agent 1 became an adult, I put a saddle on him and parked him in the corner of the anvil to save space and begin the line for my future Rex army. More wood got farmed because those tracks weren't crafting themselves, and more tracks got placed because yes, they wouldn't place themselves either. Ark isn't that nice. Little by little, looking at how close I had gotten to the pillar, what first seemed like a daunting task had turned into another day in the life for me. Another stone run ensued as I ran out of it from all the cementing paste crafting, and there was still an entire inventory of chitin left, so best believe I did the fattest stone run of the wipe to complement the absurd amount of chitin waiting for me at base. Hell yeah, look at all that paste crafting in that chem bench. There it was, day 69. I had enabled mating on the Yankees to produce an egg. I wanted to take my metal farming to a new level, and because Heymanky had only got an 80% imprint, I was ready to go the full road with Heymanky 2.0. It hatched, and there I was. Its first imprint was a cuddle, so I hugged it by pressing E. The next request was a Maginberry, which once again I quickly provided. Back at the Yankees, I realized they kept mating and they were trying to raise an Yankee on their own, but nothing could hide from me, so I laid on the ground and blasted the baby Yankee away. Meanwhile, the luckier Yankee asked for a walk and I took it for one. So far so good. The Yankee was projected to hit 100% imprint well before it was fully raised, and of course there it was, jerboas, the infamous stupid cooked prime meat. Without even blinking, I sent the Anki to customer service at heavengates.org. These creatures seem to forget how replaceable they are, but the Anki got its revenge by making the game crash. Once again, a rollback happened. I reparked the Rex, farmed the trash yellow drop as well as a blue drop with some rare flowers, and I killed another Anki baby these parents were trying to raise behind my back. Anyway, a new Anki egg was dropped, and hopefully this would be the one that got fully imprinted. The first 20% would be from kibble, the next 20% from a walk, the 60th percent from a cuddle, the semi-final imprint was another walk, and finally the last imprint would be the Verdberry itself. And there it was, a fully imprinted Anki. It had been a while, but I was back to adding more tracks to my railroad, each track inching closer and closer to that pillar, but I was almost there. And I wasn't done with the new Anki just yet. I threw a couple wyvern eggs on the air conditioners, and before I could perform the XP massacre, I looted another mid-yellow drop with an overhyped ring around it. Before swiping the wyverns to sleep, I collected an explorer note with the Anki to make the experience boost 4 times higher. When I got back home, I swiped the wyverns and I couldn't stop there. I hatched more Rex eggs and ended up with 60 levels all into melee for a total of 736 melee along with 100% imprint. This Anki was a demon. Day 70 started with some Rex deleting from the timeline and cooking their prime meat. I also lost all of my hotbar because I popcorned it when chasing those Rexes to death and it all despawned. Karma, I guess, but my hotbar could be farmed back. Their lives, not so much. After repairing my armor and recovering my hotbar, I took him Anki to the pillars to farm some metal. I ended up farming nearly 6,000 metal and put it all in the forge. This would surely be the last run needed to finish the track, so I did a wood run as well. A bit of metal smelted, which allowed me to craft a singular track, so I flew over to the railroads to place it, but I ran into one more foundation support issue and I wasn't an expert at this stuff. Back at base, I picked up some Rex eggs and put them in the fridge, which was filled by now with those Rex eggs. I also collected more metal ingots and put them in the smithy. Look at how fat my vault has gotten. Then I put 6 meat jerky into the fridge and later crafted a second cart for the train. After that, I hopped on my RG to loot the oil rig, which had 65 oil by now. Kind of disappointing, but at least the other rig had 117 by then. This oil was going to be used to craft another vault that would be placed on the train. Day 71 started by collecting more ingots from the forge, and I grabbed the heavies and ammo in the vault to try and place them on the train to turn it into some sort of moving death machine, but the server settings didn't allow me. After some hacker setting coding, I enabled turrets on platforms, but when I relogged, apparently the game decided to not care about my settings and still didn't let me put turrets on the train. So I guess no death on wheels for me. Sucks. Would have been hilarious to see Thomas the train kill wild dinos in a drive-by, which meant the ammo and turrets got put back in the vault. I refilled my canteens in the tap and picked up ballerina to go deathworm hunting, but first the yellow drop had to be looted and it was garbage. One more drop, also trash. Who would have thought? Okay, one more drop, sorry. 3rd time's the charm, right? Yeah, kinda actually. 2 elevator platforms. Since the last drop was good, I went for a 4th to keep the streak going, and boom, another 2 elevator platforms. I returned to base to cook the raw meat I farmed and to put away the hide. Then I crafted an elevator track to demolish the elevator platforms on it. Each platform gave me 200 ingots, which totaled out to 800. This allowed me to craft the vault easily. A Rex had hatched and was fully grown, so I had to 1v1 until I deleted it. After the homicide, I flew to the train to place a vault on the first cart. That's when I spotted a Rex inside the anvil mesh, and I despise meshers, so I clapped it. Meanwhile, the Oasisaur was starving to death. Maybe one day I'll feed it properly before it starves. The meat in the grill cooked, so I transferred it to the trough, and I collected all the crops from the garden to put them in the cooker. Finally, back to what I was going to do a while ago until the yellow drops distracted me. The Dunes adventure in search of death worms began. But little did I know how hard finding these things would be. I was now starting day 72, and so far a death worm was as real as a fairy tale. That's unfortunate for the bugs that crossed paths with me and got deleted by an enraged megatherium called Ballerina. The morning night sky turned into full-on peak daylight, and still the death worm was absent. In fact, I even searched up their spawn points just to make sure I wasn't being a bob. But I did catch a glance at some new info, and that's the fact that death worms hate the wyvern smell, so I mounted the wyvern and flew near the ground to just travel faster and find the worm. After traveling another half of the map, the method gave its fruits. Actually, it gave too many fruits. I didn't find one death worm, I found 2, and had to 1v2 them with the megatherium. Not a problem though, as the enraged megatherium could easily take them both down. It was dealing 260 damage per hit, while the worms were dealing no more than 44 damage per hit. Before you knew it, one of them got sent to the respawn while the other was still resisting death. Without even realizing though, mid-fight the bug buff on the mega ran out, and now the death worm was putting in work on my ballerina. But I quickly capitulated on this and got on the wyvern, which should have been my first option anyway, as its fire dealt a ton of damage to the worm. The reason I was looking for these worms was to get treasure maps from them, but none of them gave me one. At least they lived up to their names, or died up to their names. But back at base, well, things were doing fine. I put the poly I got in the fabricator, the chitin in the chem bench, well, partially. The rest got put in the vault, and I put away the death worm horns in case I needed them in the future. All yellow drop near base got looted, but I mean, just look at this thing. I flew back to base, collected more Rex eggs, and put them away. Day 73 started with me eating Rex eggs for protein because I was on a bulk. The Anki and RG were summoned to the train for metal farming purposes, and I brought foundations with me to place them next to where this rock kept spawning and blocking my train's path. I hoped that would fix it. Another tree was in the way, so I broke it and placed foundations right by it as well. A cardinal walked down the wrong street and got what it deserved, and another cardinal didn't learn from his cousin's mistake. A few tracks later, the train couldn't advance, but this time it wasn't because of a rock or a tree. The track was just too close to the ground itself, which meant it was time to pick the tracks back up and figure out a better path. I'd rather save you the actual migraine of a headache it was for me to fix this. It took so long I ended up working out how to use connectors and shorter tracks without resorting to YouTube. All you need to know is that after 40 minutes of me going back and forth like Cometazine, I solved the problem, only to run into another problem right by this dino skeleton, but once again I was victorious in the end and the track could continue. Later on, the track made it close enough to the pillar where the metal would be farmed, and honestly this distance satisfied my laziness. Day 74, I tested the new railroad by running the train right over it, and it all worked just fine. I put the train on reverse and made it back to base. That's when I realized I had to farm, so I had to W key the train once again, and now the metal farming began. The usual amount got farmed, but the return to base was not as usual because I landed on the train's carts and backpedaled to base like a boss. I mean, look at me. Ignore my hair. I haven't got on a fade in a while, but I could scroll YouTube shorts while returning to base. I don't recommend shorts though, but you don't want to end up, spending 6 hours on it like most people and having ADHD. Anyways, when I got back to base, I transferred all the metal into the forge. Then I flew to the dunes to once again find the death worm, this time hoping to get that treasure map. The Megatherium was not brought along because the wyvern was 10 times faster and better. This time finding the death worm was actually another dreadful 40 minutes of flying. Eventually, I miraculously flew right into the worm out of all places. It was exactly in the same spot I flew by. A couple of fire breaths and bites later, the death worm renamed himself to a dead worm. I couldn't think of an offensive enough word without getting demonetized, so let's just say the foolish worm didn't give me a treasure map, which was mildly infuriating. Even worse was the red crate I looted with an apprentice ghillie suit BP. Now that I was by Red Obelisk where the mantis spawned, I figured why not farm polymer. Not too long after, I discovered the best spawn point for these mantis, and that was right next to this Colosseum looking ruin. About 5 mantis were found next to it, and all 5 suffered the penalty of death in exchange of polymer. Well, day 75 came around, and because I couldn't find any more mantis around the arena, I dipped back to base. But of course, not before looting a yellow drop that, bro, it went into the mesh. Nice. You know what? That would be the last time too, because I farmed 4 thatch foundations and placed them down to make a cross that would prevent the drop from going into the mesh next time, or that I hoped at least. The next drop I looted was red and not in the mesh, but I wish it was because the loot was beans. For real this time. Back at base, I first turned on some lights, then put some polymer and kited into the vault, repaired my desert armor as per usual, transferred plenty of ingots from the forge to the smithy, crafted some grapples and 4 tracks to step even closer to the pillars. But after placing just 1 track, I couldn't place another due to foundation support. I tried, I really did, with the short tracks, the connector, but I just couldn't get any good placements to advance the railroad. Back at the crib, I transferred more metal into the smithy and crafted a single Rex saddle. But why stop there? I grabbed a good bit of hide from the vault to craft over 10 new Rex saddles. I'd still need about 8 more, but this was good for now. The crop plots were filled with, well, crops, so I looted each of them to put them all in the cooker. The grill and the fridge had a bunch of cooked meat that I transferred over to the trough to my dinos for them to enjoy. Day 76 started by crafting some shovels and grabbing the pots from the vault. It was time to save the Oasisaur from starvation and probably give it some sort of use. I struggled far too much to tame that thing just to let it starve. After crafting enough pots, I went out to dig some trees to feed the Oasisaur, but during this process I got jumped by a pack of like 5 terrorbirds and they indeed terrorized me. I tried pumping them instead of just getting on my wyvern, and my arrogance quickly turned into humility as me and the respawn menu high-fived. I respawned after not being clapped in a while with a higher purpose. First I grabbed my loot, second I grabbed the terrorbird souls. I hunted them all down one by one, and when I thought the job was done, the last bird showed up on its own and I had no mercy for it. Then my tree shoveling gig went smoothly as I collected each tree with 0 resistance, except for this Daeodon who got put to sleep instantly. After each pot was filled with the tree, I flew back to the Oasisaur, but I found an unclaimed Rex that somehow ended up down here. So I killed it, and that's when I discovered an OP mesh hole that someone will probably put on a YouTube video and call it an OP rat hole. Looks like this direwolf family got ahead of the YouTubers. They were vibing inside of the mesh hole, and after killing the parent, I was able to claim the baby. Anyway, I put the pots in the Oasisaur and they barely boosted the food bar. I knew some trees had the potential to give like 10,000 food, so I tried shoveling a different one down, but couldn't. I made 3 more shovels because I was about to put in the work and ventured deep into the Scorched Midlands to find different types of trees, until I ran into these that looked suspicious. But yet again, I couldn't shovel it, so I resorted to the good old YouTube tutorials, and that's where Teachers Games 2 came in clutch as per usual. This tree with leaves colored as if it were fall would be the ones that gave the Oasisaur around 5,000 food per tree. While farming a tree, tree, a rock golem popped out, so I quickly moved out. And now back at the Oasisaur, I put the pots inside of it, and voila, its food bar was 75% filled up. Its health being low would drain the food, so I brought it up to the anvil and healed it up with the pig. Otherwise, all my hard-earned food would go to waste. On day 77, I would craft the metal one by one and brought a generator along as well to place it on the middle of the Oasisaur's back. Why? Because perhaps in the future we would pull up to the Wyvern Trench with a warmonger of an Oasisaur. I brought the Doed and RG to the choo-choo car and autopiloted to the other end of the railroad to go on a massive stone run. You don't need to watch what happened here. It's just a banging amount of stone I farmed, and then full reverse back to base on the train. Then I parked the Doed inside the base to throw stone into the bench and craft loads of paste. With all that freshly crafted paste, I made a bunch of metal ceilings. These ceilings would go right on the foundations to extend them right over the Oasisaur. Later, I'd place the turrets there so they could shoot below the Oasisaur if necessary. And the time for day 78 arrived, back at the Red Obelisk after a long time to go on another big silica pearl farm. It was nighttime as well, which made farming easier as they like to glow in the dark. Ark. Crocodiles that jump at you. Peak Ark. I whipped up all the land pearls and then took care of the aquatic ones by whipping them from the rocks in the lake. And I got jumped by a scorpion, but the wyvern taught it a hard cold lesson. An innocent jerboa came my way and I shot it out of the way. And an RG suffered the pain of burning alive. A couple minutes later, I felt like enough pearls had been farmed. In fact, I had over 3,000 pearls. If my math didn't fail me, that's like 1,000 electronics. So back to base it is. But as per usual, a drop had to be farmed first. It was a ritual at this point. The purple actually had, never mind, it was garbage. The raw meat I farmed got put in the grill and pearls immediately sent to the fab to make 1k electronics. I hopped on the Oasisaur's back to check it out, I guess, because that's all I did. After jumping down, I grabbed oil from the dung beetle and grabbed 2 massive feces that the Oasisaur dropped. I repaired my chainsaw and a red drop was spotted, which I looted for absolutely nothing useful. Then I went on a couple of wood runs. Nope, not for tracks this time, but to fill the forge up to make charcoal. All that wood will end up as gunpowder sooner or later. I can already hear the entire Wyvern Trench screeching and begging for mercy. Day 79, I couldn't and still don't believe I've made it this far, and so have you. Pat yourself on the back, because the next 20 days will give us both some permanent drama. Anyways, I was still chopping trees when I found the Pegomastack stuck on one, and because I hate the guts of these things, I was willing to lose out on some wood to leave it stuck there for all eternity. But it got out. Since permanent jail wasn't an option now, I gave it permanent heaven. My wood farming ended up when the forge was filled to the brim with it. The chemistry bench was about to make a lot of gunpowder, or spark powder, sorry, so I removed the chitin to get it ready. I took the Yankee for a flint run, but then had a better idea. What if instead of farming flint with the Yankee and stone with the Doed, I made an industrial grinder? Although these cost a liver, an arm, an eye, and my left leg, it would kind of pay off in the end, as it could convert my massive stone runs into flint to make spark powder a lot quicker. So off I went on the train with the Yankee and RG to farm for 2,000 crystal. Yes, that's how much you need for a grinder. I farmed all the available crystal, returned to base, and while moving it into the fabricator, I discovered I farmed exactly 911 crystal, which was kind of sus. Then I had to get oil, but it was my day apparently, as each rig had hundreds of it. The last resource I needed was metal, so I did a metal run, of course. The other half of the crystal I was missing got farmed as well. Day 80 started while Crip walking backwards with the train towards base with a bunch of crystal which got put in the fab. Then the metal was brought up and placed in the forge, and that's when I went AFK for like 30 minutes to go play FIFA. All those Ark drops I looted activated my gambling DNA, and my friend wagered $20, so I accepted and lost the first game. We did double or nothing and I took another L. But I knew when to quit, so I doubled or nothing again. Just kidding. After the second L, I was back to Ark. At least a bunch of ingots and charcoal were made. Side note, I played with Man City and he used Madrid. I should have known better. Anyway, the next few minutes were spent kind of just waiting for metal to smelt to make the grinder. But I did notice the fab didn't have enough slots due to all the organic polymer I had to use, so I crafted polymer to empty some slots. I thought of placing the grinder where my king seat was, so I moved the whole setup to a corner, which made it look even cooler. While waiting for the metal, I took the Doed on the train for another stone run, but I made the whole trip pointless by flying back near base to loot a yellow drop. But the drops items were even more pointless somehow. I farmed a bunch of stone and that was pretty much it for day 80. I was returning back to base backwards on Thomas when the clock hit day 81. This was going to be a long day. The 80s was just beginning. Oh, and when I got back to base, I looked behind me and my tames had been left behind. Apparently this patch of the railroad keeps my dinos stuck. After picking them back up, I made it to base. I brought the Doedic inside with all its stone and moved metal from the forge to the fabricator. All I needed for the grinder now was poly, which I grabbed from the vault and crafted the grinder. Unfortunately, it wouldn't fit in the spot I wanted unless I made a normal ceiling. Then I changed my mind and put it on top of the fabricator, and that worked well. All the stone from the dough got dropped into the grinder to put it to work immediately. I grabbed poly, oil, and paste from the vault to put it in the fabricator, as well as electronics that were in the smithy to make heavy turret, but first I crafted more electronics. The dung beetle had processed 200 fertilizer by now, so I put it to use by filling each crop plot to the max with fertilizer, ensuring a long-term contract for my crops. Back at the train, another stone deposit was waiting, and I brought it up to base with a couple of slow trips. The grinder was still grinding stone into flint, and the fab making electronics, while the forge was still smelting. What a productive base for a productive player. Back on top of the Oasisaur, I tried placing quarter ceilings to inch a bit further past the Oasisaur's back, and then my game decided to crash and roll back to the point where I had just ended the stone run. But I'll save you the torture of rewatching everything I had to repeat, so just pretend I never rolled back. Now I was farming metal with the Yankee, and as always, when I was done farming, I reversed on the train. Once again, my tames were getting stuck on the road and I had to rescue them, but in the end it was still a decent track. Oh, and a yellow drop with a ring was right next to base, and that was far too attractive to ignore, so I went to loot it and got, you won't guess it. Nah, you literally won't believe it, bro. If I show you, promise you won't think I scripted it. Nah, I can't show you, sorry. Next, the next drop had shadow steak. Jesus Christ. And okay, I'll stop trolling. This is what the last drop had. 2 pieces of raw mutton. I flew back to base after 2 upsetting drops and cooked 2 pieces of mutton. Then I repaired my desert armor for the 50th time in this video. I put all the metal from the Yankee in the forge, and the Oasisaur was in the way, so I came up with a great parking spot for it. The roof. Day 83, the spark was done crafting by now, and I moved out the stone from the bench to give space for some charcoal to make gunpowder. The Rexes were about 80% raised, but imprinting still had to be done. Eventually, they grew up fully, so I saddled one up and parked it. But I remembered the other Rexes were at the bottom, so I flew down to rescue Agent 1 by cryopoding him and releasing him at the top. The other Rexes were also saddled up and lined up next to their fellow agents. Here goes the next batch of Rex eggs that I dropped by the ACs, and they popped out to be named the Agents 5, 6, and 7. I copied the settings from an adult Rex to make my life easier, and I also started incubating 3 more eggs. A bunch of RG eggs I dropped to despawn accidentally ended up being born, like you, kinda. So I tried giving them a late abortion, but that ended up backfiring me. When I walked outside, they got killed by turrets, but the aftermath inside the base was not looking too well. My sofa and table were gone. All the Rex eggs hatched, and I had to claim them. On day 84, I grabbed a couple Rex saddles from the smithy, and I parked Agent 2 in line again because I suffered another rollback on day 83 that I didn't even mention to spare you the pain. The rollbacks were just normal for me at this point. I dropped like 6 Rex eggs, and no, I wasn't planning on raising them all at the same time. I was just getting their incubation to 1% so that they could hatch instantly in the future whenever I wanted. The ones that were ready got put in a feeding trough next to me while the rest got incubated. This Rex hatched without my permission, so I gunned them down. In my head, I had this insane plan to fill a bunch of feeding troughs with meat and never run out, so I farmed a couple of troughs and placed them down next to the hatching area. Then I went on a meat run by starting out in the dune area next to my base. One of the Rexes that fell earlier followed me all the way over here to help. Day 85, I was relogging back into the game, but nearly respawned as a wolf attacked me, and I tried fleeing until I remembered I had a pump. After that incident, I looted the average yellow drop just to go loot another average yellow drop, as well as an average red drop. 3 drops, 0 usefulness. 1 game, Ark. There I was back at base with a good bit of meat that I cooked on my new grills to then put it in the trough for the babies to eat. Back to meat running I went because I could never be enough meat. A few moments later, I was raising Agents 6, 7, and 8 all at once. One of them asked for Verdberry as their first imprint and the other for a cuddle. How cute. The third one wanted to walk. Time passed. I was basically AFK waiting for imprints in between while questioning my existence. And then the Rexes finally grew. I saddled them up and put them in the army line. Day 86 started at the same time as the life of these 3 new Rexes, Agent 9, 10, and 11 of course. While they were raising, I abandoned them to pursue my gambling drop opening addiction. A yellow with a ring that was really a transgender white drop demanding to be seen as a yellow with a ring, because how could this be a yellow drop, bro? Anyways, I flew to the next drop, which was yellow without a ring, but somehow better than the last one, and I used the cluster grenades to see some fireworks. When I got back, I was kind of late to the Rex's imprint, but not too far off, so I imprinted them each. A sandstorm arrived while I was imprinting each Rex and secured 80% imprint, but 100% wouldn't be possible as I was kind of an absent father farming drops. Nevertheless, they got added into the army. Day 87, and yes, I'm flying to another yellow drop. Leave me alone. Yes, I know it sucked. I don't care. One day I will get my big break. Trust me, bro. Matter of fact, check this red drop out. Yikes. Okay, this yellow is the one. I can feel it in my bones. Actually, the only thing I really felt was this rock thrown at me by a golem. And the drop, well, it disappointed only me at this point. I'm the only one Actually shocked. Back at base, I was raising more Rexes. In fact, agents 12, 13, and 14 were just done growing, and I saddled each of them to put them in line. Another meat run was done to make sure the Rexes kept healing, as I didn't want to have half health Rexes on day 100 for the boss fight. My desperation for meat went too far, as I betrayed one of my OG Rexes for like 100 raw meat. I am the Judas of Ark. Day 88, and I'm nearly done raising these agents. Of course, getting full 100% imprint was possible on all 3 of them, because I am him. Then I dropped 3 more Rexes one at a time, and noticed a nice orange coloring, so I thought it was a mutation, until I looked at the parent. Then I grabbed cooked meat from the grill and put it in the trough. I also took the Rex saddles from the smithy and equipped it on the Rexes to then park them in the army line. Then I whipped each Rex away from the platform as I imprinted them each. It was time for another meat run, however, so I got on the wyvern and headed out to the dunes this time, because I remembered how much meat snakes give. Each gave me around 150 raw meat, and they were everywhere in the dunes, so this made the meat runs quite easy. When I felt enough had been farmed, I returned to cook all the meat and put the hide away in the smithy to craft more Rex saddles. I also imprinted each Rex and then got on the wyvern to go loot a yellow drop with... yikes. But I couldn't stop there, could I? More cringe loot was looted. It took me way too long to return though, and now the Rexes were nearly grown and 100% imprint would be impossible. In fact, they didn't even get 80%, which meant death to all 3 of them. I was not trying to throw the boss fight, to be honest. Day 89, the final agent was now growing, and all the Rexes had been enabled mating so that they could mass produce more Rex eggs. But Amian, don't you need... You don't need more Rexes. You have all 19 ready for battle. Well, it was time to sacrifice some Rexes for experience. The final bits of imprint were being given to the final Rex as I kept looting more Rex eggs and putting them in the fire wyvern. The last imprint for the last Rex... The last imprint for the last Rex was a cuddle. How cute. More Rex eggs got picked up and put in the wyvern, and finally the final Rex became an adult. So I saddled her up and put her in line. And now I keep messing up, but you know what? I don't want to edit. And now I would grab 3 Rex eggs and throw them out to start warming up. The first Rex I would give the levels to would be the last Rex, and then continue in that order. While the eggs incubated, I waited on the Rex patiently. When they hatched, I awarded them with the world record of dying after birth. Then I kept hatching eggs to see how many each Rex would need to get a decent amount of levels, and that number ended up being around 6 Rex eggs. Oh boy. The final Rex got around 45 levels from the massacre. The prime meat from all the baby Rexes was not going to waste, so I put it all in the grill to cook, and then put in the troughs to make my Rex army a cannibal army. Anyway, I was leveling up Agent 16 now, who munched on a huge batch of Rexes all at once. And now I was in the 90s. Yes indeed, it was day 90 now, and it started with me picking up laid Rex eggs from each female. My army was soulless, but at least they didn't have to face the massacre. Instead, they could just stare at the view and pretend this isn't happening, until it was their turn, of course, to do the bidding. I lined up a Rex and dropped a bunch of eggs in front of it that could have been him, but without hesitating, as soon as they hatched, this agent shredded them. But while parking him back, I had a little incident and fell all the way down, so I cryopoded him and came up via the ramp to then throw him out. While moving out the next Rex, I had incident part 2 and fell down to repeat the same process. I put more prime meat into the grills. Agent 11 then got ready to do his part, but while he was getting ready, I collected some more Rex eggs, then got on Agent 11, and he got a total of 40 levels after the massacre. It was time to collect a bunch of prime meat that was cooked in the grills now, and I brought some Rex eggs with me that were in the fridge. This cooked prime was placed in a new trough that I put closer to the Rexes because one of them were starving, and that wouldn't allow it to heal. I brought the Deodon later on to boost the healing process for the Rexes, but it was healing so many at once that none of them were fully healed, and the pig ran out of food instantly. But I'm sure it did something at least. Day 91 started by putting a bunch of prime meat in a trough, and with the continuous murder of baby Rexes, there was just a slight issue. My Rexes were quite thick and couldn't fit through, but eventually I got the Rex out of the line to go kill the new fresh order of Rex babies for a bunch of levels. Some eggs hadn't hatched, so I waited an extra bit and then munched them as well. I picked up more Rex eggs and put them in the wyvern. I also put the prime baby meat Rex meat in the grills to feed it for my army later. Day 92 started by cooking more prime meat while also getting another Rex ready for an XP boost, but I accidentally fell forward, so I had to cryopod it and release it next to the babies that hatched and started roaming around the anvil. 50 levels were applied from this Rex massacre, and a slot cap of prime meat was put in the grills. Right after that, I collected all the Rex eggs that were waiting and then threw them out to incubate. The next Rex got lined up next to the eggs, and I just sat there waiting for them to be born. Oh, and I collected all the prime meat in the grills to put it in the fridge. But I also put some on the pig so its food bar could go up to heal Rexes later. So far so good. The cycle continued. Kill a bunch of Rexies, take their prime meat to the grills, collect new fertilized Rex eggs, and onto the next Rex that needs levels. At the very least, there were only about 3 more Rexes left to level up, which was good because this was just getting inhumane. Day 93 was pretty uneventful. It started with me picking up the pig and dropping it off on a pillar because pig's food bar can instantly refill if you leave it out of render with some food. Back at base, I killed the last sacrificial Rexes because all my Rexes were properly leveled now. or so I thought. The pig healing commenced on day 94. The food bar was dropping at tremendous speeds due to each Rex being low health. They all leeched and begged for health, and the pig complied until it ran out of food, of course. That's when I refilled it with more prime meat and left it at the pillars again out of render so its food bar could refill instantly. The Lystra, who I tamed for basically no reason, was petted, and the dung beetles didn't have to make fertilizer anymore, so I disabled their feces collection, dropped their fertilizer, and let them wander about freely. More pig healing ensued until all the Rexes were fully healed and ready for battle. Because I didn't need the piggy anymore, I ran off the cliff with it. Goodbye, sir. Day 95 started with me walking back up to the anvil to get on my Yeti and whistle all the Rexes because it was time to take them to Green Obelisk. First, I ran in circles to group them up together and not leave any of them behind, and then I headed out straight to Green Ob. I parked the Yeti right in the middle, and the rest of the Rexes followed right up. By day 96, all the Rexes were properly parked, and I had to walk back to base to take my beloved train for one last spin around the tracks. I also gave each of my dinos a personalized goodbye that was weakly correlated to their behavior. The dung beetle was released into the wild, and I collected the talons and artifacts to put them in the obelisk and be ready to start the boss. Day 97, I flew back to the ob to drop off the tributes for the boss. The Rex had a level to spare each, so I leveled them up. All the lights back at base were turned off, as if there was no more returning at this point. I also sat on my king seat for one last time. On day 98, I looted a yellow drop in hopes of getting some good Rex saddles. I didn't. Then I looted a purple that was trash, and honestly that made me not want to do drops anymore, so that was it for day 98. Day 99, my last day on this map before I ventured away into the boss fight to then ascend. Of course I felt obliged to return to base and give one last goodbye to my homeland and my friends, and to make sure nobody ever could take advantage of all my hard work, I despawned all of my loot. Vault, fabricator, smithy, everything, and then I closed the gates, got on my wyvern, and flew to the obelisk. And well, this is how day 100 started. I figured the last day should be honored by presenting it in a more natural form, as if I was an entertaining person who could give live commentary instead of voiceovers. I hope you guys enjoy this last day. Let's start this boss fight. And then we gotta wait for the thing to hit us. There we go. They should all attack the manticore now. Come on. See if I can whistle them instead. Alright, that's working better. There we go. The boss fight has begun. Oh, that thing is stuck already. Dude, that thing is dead. It's already lost. Holy. I over-prepared for this for sure. I'm not even on the Yeti. I'm supposed to be in the Yeti. Let me get on the Yeti. I'm supposed to be Yeti buffing these things. Let me go get on it. We need to put the Rex's targeting on high so it could attack the manticore. Let's Yeti buff them now that we're here. Alright, let's keep buffing the Rexes and wait for the manticore to attack again. Dude, but this boss fight is a lot easier than I thought. I thought I would struggle a bit with these Rexes, but no, these Rexes were ready. This guy really needs to land. He's pissing me off. There we go. Look at them all go. Oh, that thing is down with Yeti buff. Let's go, bruh. Alright, it's nearly halfway, and the Rexes, I think, are fine. I just hope the Rexes don't start falling asleep out of nowhere. That would not be good for me. Alright, Manticore, stop delaying the inevitable. You know you're done for, mate. Just land. Make this easy for yourself. There we go. Alright, it's gonna get to 30% soon of health. And soon we'll be able to finish this 100 days, and we can all go back to our lives. Dude, stay down there. Stay put. Mate, who gave this thing wings, bro? I swear. I doubt my pump does much. Just 14 damage. It does like 100 damage per shot. No point. You know what? Throw this thing away. Let's go. It landed. Beauty buff. I want to go play soccer. I want to do something else. I want to go live my life again. I want to see grass. Come on, just die. Die so I can see sunlight again. I'm more pale than a Twilight vampire. Come on. Bro, it's literally a raindrop away from death. There's golems now? What the? Manticore, I need to finish this boss fight now. Please, sir. Please and thanks. Put the drip on. What's all these colors? Oh! I dropped the drip. Oh, Bruh. I didn't even record killing the manticore. I was too busy with the drip. But we killed it. 100 days over. Let's get the Ellie. I know I should be more excited, but I was too busy with my drip. Look at that Ellie. Sheesh. No, I wanted to dance on the body because Granty didn't do it. Dumb Rexes ate it. Oh, no, they didn't. I'm gonna dance on it. Mosh. Yes, sir. Wait, that's it? Oh. Okay, we're ascending. Let's go, guys. That's 100 days. Thank you for watching, and let me know what I should do next, although I don't want to do it. I'm very close to committing the self. Never mind. Hit like.